"I came to get my pot and plate," she said. "Oh, you've got company." Hamish made the introductions. "A reporter!" exclaimed Leslie. "You should know better than speak to the press." "We're old friends," said Elspeth, "and Hamish knows I never use anything without his permission." Leslie stood awkwardly. "Anyway, I came to pick up my things and thank you for the flowers. They were beautiful." Elspeth wished she would go away, but her innate Highland courtesy, combined with the fact that this was a forensic expert who might have some interesting details, prompted her to say, "I was just about to take Hamish out for dinner. Why don't you join us?" "I don't want to barge in." "It's all right. Give her a glass, Hamish, and then, when we finish our drinks, we'll walk along to the restaurant." Over an excellent meal, Leslie listened as Hamish began to talk about the 3 murders. It was a concise and intelligent report. Leslie felt a stab of irritation that such an obviously intelligent man should waste his talents stuck in a Highland village. Of course, if he married the right sort of woman, she would drum some sense into his head. Then she became aware that Elspeth's eyes were surveying her, and those eyes seemed to be saying, "I know exactly what you're thinking." To her fury, Leslie found herself blushing. She rose to her feet. "Got to go to the loo." "Hamish, oh, Hamish," teased Elspeth when they were alone. "She plans to marry you and make you over." "Stop havering, Elspeth, and turn your mind to these murders. What do you think?" "There doesn't seem to be anything to connect them. If Fiona McNulty was on the game, then that sort of life can lead to violence, and her death may not be connected to the others. Katrina seems to have made so many enemies it's hard to know where to start. Now, it's the one in the middle that fascinates me, Ina Braid." "Why her?" "Think about it. Here's a decent, God-fearing woman, hardly a murderee, so she must have known something. It stands to reason. So the thing to do is to ask and see if she said something to anyone. I feel she must have said something, and if she did, whoever she talked to might be too frightened to say anything. She must be part of the first murder, but I can't see any reason for the murder at Bonner." Leslie rejoined them. "We've just been discussing the murders," said Hamish. "Any idea when Fiona McNulty was killed?" "About 4 or 5 days ago, I'd guess. Someone must have battled their way through the snow to get to her. The mobile home is parked on heather, so there's no hope of getting a footprint. Everything in the trailer had been wiped clean, not even a spare hair." "Do you know if they found a mobile phone?" "No sign of one." "Anything off that threatening note?" "What threatening note?" asked Elspeth. "Someone called her a whore and told her she'd be next." "We're working on it. It was written on a computer," said Leslie, "but whoever wrote it used gloves." "No sign of a weapon?" asked Hamish. "No, but it was not the same weapon that killed Ina Braid. This was as if it had been done with something like a hunting knife. The stab wounds on Katrina's body were made with something with a serrated edge, like a bread knife." Hamish suddenly wanted to be alone with Elspeth. "I think you should be getting on your road, Leslie," he said. "The weather's changing, and you don't want to be caught in a blizzard." Leslie looked from one to the other, and then got up and put on her coat. Hamish walked with her to the door of the restaurant. "Good night," he said firmly. She looked past him to where Elspeth was sitting watching them, and then she stood on tiptoe and planted a kiss on Hamish's cheek, said breathlessly, "I'll phone you," and hurried off into the night. Chapter 7. The mair they talk, I'm kent the better. Robert Burns. "What if," said Elspeth, when Hamish returned and sat down, "the murder of Fiona McNulty has nothing to do with the other 2? She was a woman living alone in a trailer. Some passing maniac might have wanted money for drink or drugs. Was she sexually assaulted, and was there any money in the mobile home?" "I'm slipping," said Hamish ruefully. "I'll phone Jimmy." Jimmy answered and asked, "Where are you?" "I'm in the Italian restaurant." "Be with you in a minute. I'm along at the station." Hamish rang off and said, "Jimmy's in Loch Dhu. He'll be with us in a few minutes." Jimmy arrived and shrugged off his coat. "Man, I'm famished." "Join us," said Elspeth. "I can entertain the police on my expenses." "As long as you don't go printing anything, you shouldn't." "Willie," he called to the waiter, "get me a bowl of spag bol and a bottle of plonk." "We dinna serve plonk," said Willie. Well, something red with alcohol in it. He turned to Hamish. Man, I'm tired. Give me a bed for the night. Yes, but you're not getting any of my clean underwear. Jimmy, was the Fiona woman sexually assaulted? According to the first brief examination, no. Was there any money taken? Any valuables? Not that anyone could see. Her handbag was in a cupboard, with all her credit cards and £210 in cash. There was a gold wedding ring on one finger, and a diamond ring as well. She had a wee TV in the living area. That hadn't been taken, so robbery wasn't the motive. That's a pity, said Hamish. Why? I've a feeling that if the motive had been robbery, that might have been one less murder to solve. That would have suggested a villain, and we could have checked up with people with a criminal record on the database. It looks awfully like this one was connected to the others. Is there anything in Ina Braid's background that might lead someone to kill her? She's been in the village as long as most folks can remember. Church-going, member of the Mothers' Union, absolutely blameless. Fergus Braid, in his interview, said they had been married for 28 years, both local, met at a ceilidh. Ina was working as a secretary over at Brakey, got married, and Ina became a housewife. End of story. She must have known something, said Elspeth. I've got to do a colour piece. I'll go around the village tomorrow speaking to people. They all know me, and they'll talk to me easier than they would, even to Hamish. Hamish felt suddenly uneasy. Remember, there's a murderer out there, Elspeth. Don't go putting yourself in danger. I'll be careful. Hamish awoke the next morning to the sound of a gale hammering at the building. He sniffed. There was a nasty smell of stale booze and sweat that even the many draughts in the police station couldn't dispel. Then he remembered Jimmy was sleeping in the cell. He got up, washed and dressed, and roused a protesting Jimmy. He put out a glass of water and a packet of Alka-Seltzer on the kitchen table, Jimmy's usual breakfast. He went into the bathroom and ran a hot bath. Jimmy was sitting on the edge of the bed, groaning. "I've run a bath for you," said Hamish. "I don't want a bath." "Yes, you do. You stink. Get to it." Hamish retreated to the kitchen, where he made a pot of strong coffee. Jimmy eventually emerged. He dropped 2 Alka-Seltzer tablets into the glass of water and then drank it. "I don't need a hair of the dog," he said. "I need the whole coat." The wild cat jumped on his lap and sent him tumbling backwards onto the floor. "Now isn't that amazing?" said Hamish. "Sonsie likes you." He helped Jimmy back into his chair. "If that's the result of liking, I'll settle for loathing any day. I hope Elspeth can get something." Elspeth was sitting in the Curry sisters' parlour, drinking tea. "You should get that big loon to marry you," said Nessie. "Marry you," muttered her sister, her eyes glued to the television set, watching a rerun of a Jerry Springer show. Elspeth ignored that remark. "I'd be interested to learn anything at all you know about Ina Braid." "Well, there's not much," said Nessie. The Greek chorus that was her sister was now thankfully immersed in the TV programme. "Have a biscuit. I baked them yesterday." Elspeth dutifully bit into a buttery biscuit and waited. The wind yelled and shrieked along the waterfront as if all the demons of hell had been let loose. Jessie wrinkled up her brow in thought. A downdraft blew peat smoke around the room, but neither of the sisters seemed to notice. "There's not much to tell," said Nessie. "Decent body, and her sponge cake was as light. Not much to look at, if you'd seen her afore she died, but she was right pretty once. My, what a grand tennis player she was. Champion, won the cup at the local championships over at Brakey. They've had grand courts there, but a building developer got his greedy hands on them, and they're now houses where the courts were. My, that Ellie Macpherson, her what runs the post office in Brakey, was as mad. Until Ina turned up, Ellie had been reigning champion." "Did they see much of each other?" "No, Ellie was always the one to bear grudges." "Did Ina always get on all right with her husband?" "Model couple, that's what they were." Elspeth persevered, but it seemed as if Ina had led a blameless life. She decided to drive to Brakey and see Ellie. Elspeth left her photographer at the hotel. He was a tedious man, and she wanted as little of his company as possible. But first, bending against the wind and carrying her laptop, she went into the Highland Times office and asked the editor, Matthew Campbell, if she could borrow a desk to send over some copy. "Sure," said Matthew, who had once worked alongside Elspeth in Glasgow before he had fallen in love with the local schoolteacher and decided to settle in the Highlands. "Got anything interesting?" "Not yet. Just a colour piece, the hills and heather and blah-blah." "Take that desk over there." Elspeth switched on her computer and began to work. Hamish is going to hate me for this, she thought, as she typed, "Does a serial killer stalk the mountains and glens of the Highlands?" When she had finished and was about to leave, Matthew said, "Look, you could do me a favour. I've been getting our Angus to do the horoscopes, but he's down with the cold. Could you just bash out something? You used to do them when you worked here." "Oh, all right." Elspeth had an idea and began to type busily. For each star sign, she put in a veiled warning, slightly changed in each one. For Gemini, she wrote, "Your sins will find you out. You are seen, and whoever saw you is soon going to talk. You will have a sharp pain in your side on Thursday. Do not overwork, and curb your volatile nature and propensity to indulge in violent rages." The others were all variations on the same theme. She printed it off and handed it to Malcolm. He read it with his eyebrows raised. "I'd better put a name other than Angus's at the top of this, or someone might murder him too. Suggest something." "Gypsy Rose? Without the Lee. Okay." When Elspeth went out onto the waterfront to walk to her car, leaning against the force of the wind, it looked as if the whole countryside were in motion. White-capped waves scudded along the loch, clouds streamed across the sky, hedges in gardens sent out a mournful bagpipe sound as the wind whistled through them and gates swung and banged on their hinges. She hoped her small Mini Cooper was low enough on the road not to get blown over. Fortunately, the tide was out, so that she was able to drive along the shore road into Brakey. The bungalows that overlooked the road were now closed and falling into disrepair. They had been flooded so many times, the owners had been unable to sell them. The whole coastline of Britain is being eaten away, thought Elspeth, and yet no one does anything about it. She parked in the main street and went to the post office, which was closed for the half-day. Elspeth remembered there was a flat above the post office. There was a door at the side with an intercom. She pressed the bell. A high-fluting voice demanded, "Yes?" "My name is Elspeth Grant. I'm from the Daily Bugle." The door buzzed. Elspeth opened it and climbed up shallow stone steps to where a thin woman wearing a turban and with bare arms covered in bracelets stood waiting. She struck a pose in the doorway and said, "I see. You have come to consult the oracle." "The oracle?" "I know everything about everybody." "Well, that's good," said Elspeth, following her in. Incense was burning in the living room. A sofa and 2 armchairs were draped in violently coloured material, all red and yellow swirls. The carpet and walls were bright yellow. A bowl of yellow silk flowers stood on a round table by the window. Beside the bowl was a large crystal ball. A mobile of various crystal shapes hung from the ceiling. A bookshelf was crammed with books on astrology and the occult. "Sherry," offered Ellie. "Yes, please. I didn't think anyone drank sherry any more." "My father, God rest his soul, always said that sherry was the only suitable drink for a lady." Ellie disappeared and returned with a tray with a decanter on it, but instead of sherry glasses, she poured the drink into 2 whisky tumblers. "Sláinte," she said. "Sláinte," echoed Elspeth. The sherry was heavy and sweet and had a faint chemical taste. "Now, sit down and tell me how I can help you." Elspeth sat down in one of the armchairs. Ellie put a little side table next to her, covered with a lace doily. "First question," said Elspeth. "Did you ever meet Katrina Beldam?" "Yes, I suppose you heard that." Elspeth hadn't, but maintained a discreet silence. "I wanted to see if she was genuine," said Ellie. "There are so few of us about." "So few of what?" "White witches." "Go on." "I did not stay long. I got out of that cottage as fast as I could." "Why?" Ellie lowered her voice dramatically. She was a black witch. I can still hear her dreadful laughter as I ran away. Elspeth translated this as, I said something silly, and she began to laugh, and I was offended. I said to her as I fled, the flames of hell will engulf you. Ellie leaned forward, and they did. I didn't put a curse on her mind. That is not my way. This woman is bonkers, thought Elspeth. Do you know of anyone who might want to murder her? It was the devil, come to claim his own. And what about poor Ina Braid? A variety of emotions crossed Ellie's face. It was obvious she was trying desperately to think of something, but that she didn't really know anything. There are things I could tell you, she said. Then go on, do, said Elspeth sharply. You are said to bear a grudge against Ina because she used to beat you at tennis. That's because I let her win, although I was always the better player. I am a Christian. I do not bear grudges. Then who else might have disliked Ina? I cannot. I would be putting my life in danger. Elspeth closed her notebook and got to her feet. Thank you for your time, Miss Macpherson. Got to rush. Oh, do stay. There are other things I could tell you. But Elspeth was already out of the door and clattering down the steps. Ellie was offended and felt thwarted as well. She had dreamt of featuring in the newspapers. When she opened up the post office for business the next day, she began to regale the customers with mysterious hints of how she really knew the identity of the murderer, but was too afraid to say anything. The gossip swirled out from Brakey as if borne on the gale and spread around the surrounding villages. Angela Brodie called on Hamish that evening. "Come in," he cried. "I'm right weary. All I seem to do is question folks over and over again without getting anywhere." "Have you heard about Ellie Macpherson?" "The postmistress?" "Yes, her. Aren't you supposed to say post-person or something? I can't keep up with all this PC rubbish." "Don't ask me. I don't pay any attention to it. What about her?" "Your friend Elspeth called on her. The Curry sisters told her that Ellie was a good fund of gossip. Now Ellie is saying that she knows the identity of the murderer, but couldn't say anything because she feared for her life. That's an awfully dangerous thing to say." "Don't worry about it. Ellie is a drama queen. Nobody takes her seriously." "A frightened murderer just might. Angela, have you heard anything? The slightest thing?" "I'm afraid not, Hamish. And yet, I'm probably being over-imaginative, but it's as if there's a sort of communal secret in this village. I talk to people, and I always get the feeling they are holding something back." "You don't think the villagers would shield one of their own?" "No, they would not. This business about Ellie bothers me. I'll take a run over to Brakey in the morning and tell this silly woman to keep her mouth shut." The gale was still blowing the next morning. Hamish fed his sheep and hens, told Sonsy and Lugs to look after themselves, and set off for Brakey. The incoming tide was threatening the shore road. He realized he would need to stay in Brakey until low tide came round again. It was possible to get into the town from 2 other roads, but that would have meant a long detour coming in from Loch Dhu. There was a small crowd standing outside the post office. "What's happened to Ellie?" asked Hamish sharply. "We don't know," said one woman. "She hasn't opened up, and she hasn't answered her door." Hamish rang the bell himself. No reply. There was a narrow lane up the side of the post office. He went along it and around to the back of the building. He looked up at the window of Ellie's flat. It was not very high up. He hauled a dustbin up to the wall and climbed up on it. Then he grabbed the drainpipe and shinned up it so that he could look in at the window. A sofa partially blocked his view, but with a sinking heart he saw 2 feet protruding from the end of it. Praying that she might just be ill, he clambered down and rushed round the front to his Land Rover, where he took out a police battering ram. A warning voice was telling him that he should phone Strathbane for permission before breaking in, but he decided that losing time might mean he could not save Ellie's life. "Back off!" he ordered the crowd. He swung the battering ram with all his might, and the door smashed open. He ran up the stairs. He tried her flat door and found it unlocked. He went in. Ellie was lying face down on the carpet. The back of her head was a mess of blood. A crystal ball, smeared with blood, lay on the floor beside her. Hamish knelt down and felt for a pulse, but there was no sign of life. As he phoned Strathbane and slowly left the flat to stand guard outside, ignoring the babble of questions that greeted him, he felt a purely selfish pang of fear. There were now 4 murders, 4 unsolved murders. He knew that Blair, in order to turn attention away from himself, would say that he, Hamish, was incompetent and there was simply no reason to keep a police station in Loch Dhu when Strathbane had to come over and do all the work. He waited a long time. He realized they had probably tried to take the shore road, found their way blocked by the tide, and had to circle around to reach the upper road. The crowd grew larger by the minute, but now they stood in silence. At last he heard the approaching sirens. The procession was headed by the Procurator Fiscal's BMW, an unmarked police car, followed by 2 police vans, the forensic van, the pathologist's car, a fire engine, and an ambulance. The Procurator Fiscal, Mr. Ian Bell Sinclair, was Hamish's least favourite person next to Blair. He was fat, pompous, and lazy. The job of the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland is broadly the same as that of a coroner in other legal systems. He is also supposed to direct police investigations and take statements from witnesses. Unless any of the press were around, Bell Sinclair shirked as many of his duties as possible. He ignored Hamish and turned to Jimmy and his sidekick, Andy McNabb. "Where is your boss?" "The Detective Chief Inspector is not very well this morning," said Jimmy. He turned to Hamish. "Let's have it." Hamish flatly described what he had found. "I hope you applied for permission before breaking in," said the Procurator Fiscal. "Andy got it," said Jimmy impatiently. "Let's go in. Suit up, Hamish." Hamish went to the Land Rover, got out his forensic suit, and put it on. He went back and led Jimmy up to the flat. Bell Sinclair retreated to his car. He was famous for his detestation of viewing dead bodies. "Why her?" asked Jimmy. Hamish told him about Angela's visit and how he had learned that Ellie had been bragging that she knew the murderer. "Think she did?" "I don't know. I'll go out and phone Elspeth. She interviewed her the other day." Hamish went back outside and sat in the Land Rover. He was just about to phone Elspeth when he saw her with a photographer on the other side of one of the barriers the police had used to block off the street. He got out and went up to her, saying to the policeman at the barricade, "Let her through. She's a witness." "No, not the photographer, Elspeth. Just you." "She's dead, isn't she?" said Elspeth. "Let's go to my vehicle. I need a statement from you." Elspeth described her interview with Ellie and ended by saying, "I'll swear she was just showing off. If Ellie knew the identity of the murderer, she would have told the police and then phoned all the newspapers. But someone got to hear of it and took her seriously." "Let's hope you're wrong and Jimmy finds some evidence or something. I almost hope this murder has got nothing to do with the others." "Is that all? I've got to file a story." "Yes, for now. Call on me later." "Will do. Jimmy's just come out, and your girlfriend's just gone in." "Leslie is not my girlfriend." "If you say so." Hamish saw Elspeth stop by the Procurator Fiscal's car. Bell Sinclair got out, and they exchanged a few words. Then they walked towards the police barrier. Bell Sinclair struck a pose, and Elspeth's photographer took a picture of him. "How that man does love his photo in the press," thought Hamish. He went to join Jimmy and told him what Elspeth had said. "Well, Hamish, it's the usual old drudgery. We can't tell yet when she was killed. Get into that crowd and the shops around and ask if anyone saw anything." Hamish spent a weary day, asking question after question. Of course, there were always a few imaginative people who would swear they saw a sinister figure lurking around, but further questioning and an invitation to the police station for an interview always had them backtracking like mad. By the end of the day, he began to wonder why he went on punishing himself by remaining a common bobby. If he had upgraded to detective, then he would be in the middle of knowing everything that was going on with the investigation. On the other hand, that would mean moving to Strathbane. working at first on the beat, and then sitting and passing the necessary exams. He would need to move into police accommodation, and that would mean getting rid of Sonsy and Lugs. He consoled himself with the thought that Jimmy usually kept him well informed. Hard on that thought came the other worry. 4 murders and not a clue. He hadn't bothered to ask what ailed Blair, assuming it to be one of his usual alcoholic troubles, but even from his sickbed, Blair was, he knew, capable of putting the boot in, yammering on about how incompetent Hamish had turned out to be. As he wearily returned to his Land Rover, all around the press were having a field day. Television vans were lined up outside the police barriers. The voices of TV reporters talking about the Highland serial killer were blown towards him on the decreasing wind. He drove back to the police station and fed his pets. He felt too tired to feed himself. He almost wished Leslie would arrive carrying her stew pot. He went into the office, typed up his report, and sent it off. That finished, he decided to treat himself to a meal. Hamish went out onto the waterfront. The wind had died down, but angry waves still rose and fell on the loch, crashing down on the shingle of the shore and retreating with a hissing sound. Willie Lamont welcomed him and gave him a table by the window. Hamish ordered a dish of lasagna and half a bottle of wine. When Willie arrived with the wine, Hamish said, "You've heard about the murder of Ellie?" "Aye, bad business. Evidently herself was bragging about how she knew who the murderer was. She even wrote up the horoscopes for the paper, practically saying she knew who it was." "Are you sure she wrote the horoscopes? Have you got the paper?" "Just out today. I've got a copy in the kitchen. I'll get it for you." When he returned with the paper, Hamish read the horoscopes. His heart sank. He was sure it was Elspeth's work and nothing to do with Ellie. He took out his phone and called Matthew Campbell. "Yes, it was Elspeth," said Matthew. "Angus usually does them, but he's ill, and I asked Elspeth to do them in return for the use of a desk in the office." Hamish felt a pang of fear. How stupid of Elspeth. "Don't dare tell anyone at all who wrote them," he said. "They'll think it was Angus." "So that puts his life at risk. Damn, I'd better get up there." When his food arrived, Hamish gulped it down, paid his bill, and set off up the hill to the Sears cottage. To his relief, Angus himself answered the door. "Can I come in?" asked Hamish. "I've come to warn you." "I'm fine now, Hamish. What's it about?" "I know. I've seen the paper. They'll think it was me. Who was it?" "Never mind. Have you a spare bed, Angus?" "Just the one." "I'll go back and get my sleeping bag. I'm staying here tonight." Hamish returned half an hour later, followed by Sonsy and Lugs. "I'm off to bed," said Angus. "I've kept the fire lit for you." Hamish had changed into civilian clothes. He crawled into his sleeping bag, fully dressed. He even left his boots on. The floor was hard, but he was so tired he immediately fell asleep. During the night, a long, low hiss awakened him. He opened his eyes, feeling the weight of his wildcat on his chest. In the light of the fire, Sonsy's yellow eyes burned red, and her fur was standing up on her back. "Good girl," whispered Hamish, shoving her off. He eased himself out of the sleeping bag, and then sat up and listened. All was silent, and then he heard a faint rustling sound from outside. He rose up, went to the door, and opened it. The brae stretched out empty in the moonlight. "Who's there?" he called. Silence. He walked around the cottage, but could see no one. In the morning he said to Angus, "Is there any place you could go for a few days? I've a feeling there was someone after you last night." "I could go to my friend in Ardgay. He'll put me up." "Do that, Angus. How did you know about Fiona McNulty?" "My psychic powers." "Havers, someone told you. I wish you really had psychic powers, and you could tell me the identity of this murderer." "It will come to me. My cold blocked out the spirit world." "Och, just get packed and get off," said Hamish. After Angus had left in his battered old van, Hamish went back to the police station, showered and changed into his uniform, settled his pets, and told them they were on their own for the day. and then phoned Jimmy. He told him his fears about Angus, caused by Elspeth doing the horoscopes. "Is she stupid or something?" said Jimmy. "If our murderer learns it was her, and not Angus, she'll be the next on the dead list. We haven't the manpower to guard her. Go and tell her from me to get back to Glasgow." Hamish drove up to the Tommel Castle Hotel and asked Mr. Johnson if he knew where Elspeth was. "All the press were off early and over to Brakey," said the manager. "Try there." "Try her room first," urged Hamish. "She may have stayed behind to work on an article." The manager phoned. Elspeth answered, and hearing it was Hamish who was looking for her, said she would come downstairs. Elspeth was wearing a ratty old sweater over faded jeans and large, clumpy boots. Hamish wished she'd dress up a bit, put on a skirt, and then wondered whether, if he ever married, he would turn into the sort of bullying husband who chose his wife's clothes. "You look anxious," said Elspeth. "What's up?" "Let's go through to the lounge and find a quiet corner. This is serious." When they were seated, Hamish leaned forward and said, "Elspeth, you wrote those horoscopes in the Highland Times?" "Yes. Matthew was stuck, because I know. I had to sleep at Angus's place last night." "Why? Is he still ill?" Her eyes widened. "You think the murderer thinks it was him, and might come after him?" "Yes, I think someone tried to get him last night. Now, if it leaks out it was you, you'll be at risk. I want you to go back to Glasgow." "I can't, Hamish. This is big stuff. 4 murders. The news desk will ask me why I want to leave the scene, and if I say I've been writing for another paper, they'll sack me. Can I get you anything?" Both looked up, startled. One of the Polish waitresses, a tall girl with red hair, was looming over them. Hamish remembered her name was Anya Kowalski. "No, Anya," said Hamish. When she went away, Hamish said, "I wonder how long she was standing there." "I think my radar is out of kilter," said Elspeth. "I don't know. But I'm not going to quit this story, Hamish. I can look after myself." Anxiety made Hamish's temper flare. "You're a silly wee girl. Don't you dare patronize me. If you're so worried about me, get off your arse and go and find out who is doing this." Elspeth got to her feet. "If you concentrated as hard on looking for a murderer as you do looking after those pets of yours, you might get somewhere." Hamish stood up and smiled maliciously. "Dear me, lassie, I never thought the day would come when you'd be jealous o' a couple of beasties." Elspeth turned on her heel and strode off. Hamish sat down again and phoned Jimmy. "She won't leave," he said. "I put in a report about it after you called," said Jimmy. "The Procurator Fiscal says that as we've enough Strathbane men on the ground asking questions, you're to guard Elspeth yourself. He's got a soft spot for her, because a flattering picture of him and comment appeared in the Bugle today." "We had a row," said Hamish. "How can I guard her when she won't speak to me?" "Ah, love," said Jimmy. "Make it up, and keep after her." Hamish left the lounge just as Elspeth was descending the stairs with her coat on. She had completed her ensemble by putting on one of those mushroom-shaped Afghan hats. "I'm sorry if I upset you, Elspeth," said Hamish quickly. "I've got an idea. Why don't we join forces for the day?" She looked up at him. "Been ordered to guard me?" "I see your radar's working again. What I really want to do is get down to Perth and interview Ruby Connaughey. I want to start at the beginning. I want to find out as much about Katrina as possible. There's someone in her background somewhere that started all this off." "Hamish, the murderer might be right here in Loch Dhu." "Then there is a chance that someone in the village might have known Katrina before she ever came up here." "Right you are. I could do with some colour for a background piece." "Off we go, then. Let's start all over again with the first murder." Chapter 8. Thou tyrant, tyrant, jealousy, thou tyrant of the mind. John Dryden. Hamish first went to the police station and got Ruby Connaughey's address from the computer. Jimmy stepped out in front of the mobile police unit and held up a hand to stop Hamish as he was driving off. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "Here, there, and anywhere," said Hamish, waving a vague hand. "I have to protect Elspeth here, and so I'm taking her right out of the village for the day." OK, off you go. But remember, the lass is a journalist, and don't be talking off the record. As if I would, said Hamish piously. Much as he desperately wanted to solve the murders, Hamish had a guilty feeling of holiday as he drove off. It was like old times to be with Elspeth again. What did she think of him these days? Should he marry her? It would be grand to be married and maybe have a couple of children. "You've got a silly smile on your face," said Elspeth. "What are you thinking about?" "The scenery," lied Hamish. "It's a grand day." "It is indeed," said Elspeth, as they sped up over the heathery hills. That remark about his silly smile had irked Hamish. The dream of marriage to Elspeth disappeared, and he began to wonder if Ruby could actually give them any leads. Known to the Romans as Bertha from the Celtic Aberthay, meaning the mouth of the River Tay, Perth has been a royal borough since the 13th century, and was a royal residence through the Middle Ages. With its parks and Georgian houses, it is still one of the fairest of Scotland's cities. But, like all towns and cities in Scotland, it had its housing estates, and it was in one of these that Ruby Connachie lived. "She must be pretty old by now," said Elspeth. "From the reports, I gather she's 86, and got all her marbles. Well, those that haven't been cracked by jealousy." "So she was jealous of Katrina?" "Seems that way. She says Burrell doted on the girl for all he was strict. Here we are. I don't suppose any of the local police will be visiting her again, so with luck, Jimmy will never find out where we have been." Ruby lived in a block of sheltered housing for the elderly on the estate. Her flat was on the first floor. Hamish rang the doorbell. There was a long silence. "I hope the woman's alive," whispered Hamish. "I sent someone in there," said Elspeth. After what seemed an age, there was a sound of shuffling feet on the other side of the door. Then it creaked open on a chain. A small, wrinkled face peered up at Hamish. "Who are you?" Hamish introduced himself, but not Elspeth, in the hope that she would think Elspeth was a plainclothes policewoman. The door shut, and then came the sound of elderly fingers struggling to undo the chain. The door swung open again, revealing Ruby to be a small old woman leaning on a Zimmer frame. Her figure was stooped, and her grey hair, thin and sparse, showed patches of pink scalp. The door opened directly into a small living room. It was simply furnished with 2 easy chairs, 2 hard-back chairs, a small television set, and 2 occasional tables, one of which held a framed photograph of a younger Ruby on the arm of a heavy-set man. Hamish picked it up. "Is this Mr. Burrell?" "Yes, that's him. We would have been married if that fiend hadn't murdered him. He put it off too long. As soon as Katrina goes to university, we'll get married, he'd say." "What was Katrina like?" "Sleek-it. That's what she was. Sleek-it. You would think butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Yes, Daddy. No, Daddy. When she said she was at the library studying, I told him I saw her hanging out in the high street with a group of boys. When he challenged her, she burst into tears and said I was only talking to a group of school friends. And he believed her. I knew if I told any more tales on her, the wedding would be off." "Do you think anyone from the time she lived in Perth would want to kill her?" Ruby gave an asthmatic chuckle. "Apart from me. I mind there was this young fellow, Wayne Abercrombie. I was visiting my Horace." "Horace being Mr. Burrell?" asked Hamish. "Yes. This lad Wayne came hammering at the door, demanding to speak to Katrina. Horace said she was out. Wayne said he had to see her to find out whether she meant to go through with the abortion. I thought poor Horace was going to drop dead with a heart attack. He told him to get lost, or he'd call the police, and he sent me home and waited for Katrina. I phoned him the next day, and he wouldn't speak about it, except to say that it was all lies, and he didn't want to hear about it again. Oh, I wanted proof. I wanted something against her to open his eyes to what she was really like. I went in search of Wayne. He was older than Katrina and working at a garage out on the Inverness Road. Well, he tried to deny even having been at the house. Then he said it had all been a joke." "Where is he now?" "He married a local lass a whiles back. I remember seeing the wedding in the local paper. He He was a motor mechanic, so maybe he's in the same job. I always wonder if he was the one that stole the money." "What money?" asked Elspeth. "It was the night of the day that Wayne had come to the house. Someone broke in during the night and stole £500 that Horace had in his desk. He kept it to pay workmen off the books. I know it sounds bad that a churchman should pay workers off the books, but a lot of them, because of the VAT and the health and safety regulations, won't work unless it's for cash. The police were called. The lock on the front door had been jemmied open. Horace couldn't understand why he didn't wake, because he was a light sleeper. You know what I think? I think that bitch from hell gave him some sort of sleeping pill and stole the money herself." "Did you tell the police any of this?" asked Hamish. "I don't remember anything in the report." "No, it was a young female detective with a snippy way about her. I don't think she wanted to bother listening to me." After they had left her, Hamish said they should start asking at all the garages they could find and see if they could trace Wayne Abercrombie. They were lucky the first time. He was still working at the garage out on the Inverness Road. He was a tall man with a thick thatch of brown hair and a pleasant, tanned face. But on hearing that they wanted to ask him about Katrina, he scowled and said it was all in the past and he had to get on with his work. Only Hamish's threat to take him down to the police station made him sigh and say, "Let's get out of here. I'll tell them I'm taking a break and it's about a stolen car." He came back shortly and stripped off his oily overalls. "Let's go over to the pub," he said. Over a pint of beer, he reluctantly began his story. "Katrina was a wild one. I swear to God, she seduced me. I mean, she was still a schoolgirl, and her father a minister, but she got me fair worked up. Then she told me she was pregnant, and I would have to marry her. I didn't want to. There was something about her that frightened me. But I thought I'd better do the decent thing and call on her and see her father as well, because she said if I didn't marry her, she would get an abortion. He wouldn't believe me and said he'd call the police. The next day, Katrina turns up here and hands me £500 and tells me to keep my mouth shut and that never to tell anyone we had had sex. I asked her about the baby. She sneered and said there wasn't any baby. She just wanted to get married and get out of that house." "When did you last see her?" asked Hamish. He hung his head. "Out with it," said Hamish sharply. "A chap came in for repairs, a tourist, and we got to talking. He was an Australian. He said the villages were fascinating, and one even had a resident witch. Her name was Katrina Beldam, and he had a photo of her. I suddenly wanted to see her. I wanted to know if perhaps she really had been pregnant and had our child. So I went up there." "When?" demanded Hamish sharply. "It must have been the week before she was murdered. She was very bitter." "In what way?" "She blamed everyone, starting with her father. Then she blamed me for seducing a schoolgirl. I pointed out she had seduced me, and that's when she got furious and started screaming at me to get out. That's all. I swear I had nothing to do with her murder." Hamish took him through the other 3 murders, but he had cast-iron alibis for all of them. "Will this need to come out?" he asked. "I don't want the wife to know." "I'll try to keep it quiet," said Hamish. "So what do you think of what we've got so far?" asked Elspeth over lunch. "Not much," said Hamish gloomily. "I had great hopes of Wayne. Might be him after all." "I'm sure not. I don't want to alert Jimmy to the fact that I'm in Perth, where he told me not to go." "That niçoise salad of yours is going to wilt if you don't eat it, Hamish." "I keep thinking I ought to eat more healthy food, and yet when I get it, my appetite goes away." "I can put you on my expenses. Send it back and order a steak." "It's a waste." "I'm only having salad, so I can eat too." Elspeth called over the waiter and ordered Hamish a T-bone steak and chips. If only Katrina had been a nice person like Ina Braid. So many people must have wanted to murder her, mourned Hamish. Now there's the thing. What about Ina Braid? Surely the only reason she was murdered was because she knew something. She must have said something to her husband. Let's go back and see him. "I've just remembered," said Hamish. "Ina's funeral is this afternoon. I'll ask for a doggy bag and take the steak with me. We've got to be there." "It's only on the TV that murderers turn up at funerals, Hamish." I'd still like to be there. When they arrived, the church service was over, and everyone was at the graveside. The whole village had turned out. "Are you coming to the village hall afterwards?" asked Angela, appearing beside them. "The women decided that Fergus couldn't cope with the entertaining, and so they're organising the funeral baked meats for him." "We'll take a look in. I'd better contribute some whiskey if Patel has any left. How's Fergus coping?" "He's pretty shattered. It all seems to have finally hit him hard." When the graveside ceremony was over, Elspeth and Hamish bought a bottle of whiskey and followed the black-clad figures to the hall. At other funerals, people might now turn up in colours, but Loch-Dhu kept to the tradition of funereal black. At the hall, Tilly Fremont came up to Hamish, her eyes wet with tears. "I've lost my best friend," she said. "Did Ina not tell you something about the murder of Katrina?" asked Hamish. "No, all she said was good riddance, and she wasn't a secretive woman." Tilly moved away. Nessie Curry then approached them. Jessie was over at the buffet, loading up a plate with sandwiches. She glared at Elspeth. "Thun was a really stupid set of horoscopes," she said. Was it Hamish's imagination, or was there not a sudden silence all around? People were still talking, but he had an uneasy feeling that someone close by had been shocked by what Nessie had said. "Sorry about that," said Elspeth, "but Angus was off sick, and I did the best I could. You should be ashamed of yourself, meddling with people's star signs. I'm a Scorpio." "You are that," said Hamish, and led Elspeth off to the buffet. "How long is this guard of yours to go on?" asked Elspeth. "I'll try to look after you for as long as possible, but for my sake and your own, try to get off to Glasgow soon." A splash of colour appeared in the doorway of the hall. "Oh, look, it's your girlfriend," said Elspeth. "I'm off to circulate. I'll have to report on this. I see my photographer's got a glass in his hand. I'd better find out whether he got some decent pictures before he gets too drunk." Leslie, wearing a cherry-red coat, joined Hamish. "What are you doing here?" asked Hamish. "I came to see you. I thought you might like to know the latest developments." "There are a couple of empty chairs over in the corner," said Hamish. "Let's go over there." "I went back over the mobile home myself," said Leslie, "and I found one thread, a dark blue thread which might have come off a tweed coat or jacket. It was a lucky find because whoever murdered Fiona vacuumed up afterwards and took away the vacuum bag. I thought you might want to look around for someone with a jacket or coat like that." "Thanks, that's a good tip," said Hamish, thinking Leslie looked pretty with her large eyes and red gold hair. "I couldn't find you today," said Leslie. "Where were you?" "I've been babysitting my reporter friend. She wrote the horoscope program in the local paper, implying she knew the identity of the murderer." "That's odd." "What is?" "Getting you to babysit. That should be a job for a policewoman. Elspeth has helped out in cases in the past. I think Jimmy hoped she would come up with something. Oh, here's the Lord and Master." Blair pushed his way through the throng. "I've just learned you've been wasting your time, squaring around your girlfriend. I gave Anderson a rocket. These journalists are hard-boiled and don't need protection. Get up to breaky and start asking folks all over again. Someone must have seen something." "I'll tell her," said Hamish. Blair saw the trays of whiskey being carried around, and his eyes gleamed. "No, laddie, I'll tell her. Get off with you." Leslie walked out with him. "Maybe you'll be free for dinner tonight," said Hamish. "I owe you one." "I would like that." "The Italian place at 8. "Fine." Hamish felt the rest of the day was a waste of time. No one in Breaky had seen anything. Even the ones who said they had, the ones who had made up colourful stories, had nothing now to say. When he got to the restaurant that evening, Leslie was the only customer. From the village hall came the sound of the accordion and fiddle. The wake would go on all night, as usual, he guessed. Leslie was wearing a low-cut blue dress, revealing a deep cleavage. Hamish felt the first stirrings of desire. Elspeth had been cool and businesslike, and had put out no vibes at all. Her very style of dress seemed to say, "Keep off." Leslie found Hamish more attractive than ever. The fact that here was a man who didn't seem to want to drag her off to bed had piqued her curiosity about him, and his friendship with Elspeth had roused her competitive instincts. They talked over the murder cases and drank quite a lot of wine. Hamish, just before the coffee was served, reached across the table and took her hand. "Leslie," he began, when a familiar voice said, "Gosh, I'm beat. Am I in time for coffee?" Elspeth pulled up a chair and sat down. Hamish drew back his hand as if he had been scalded. "Find out anything?" he asked. "Nothing, but I've arranged I should call on Fergus tomorrow." "You shouldn't have done that without checking with me first." Elspeth looked from Hamish to Leslie. "Dear me, it seems as if I am not welcome here." "Who's not welcome?" said a cool, amused voice. Hamish stumbled to his feet, his face flaming. "Priscilla, when did you arrive?" "Today. May I join you?" "Hello, Elspeth. Who's this?" Hamish introduced Priscilla to Leslie, aware the whole time of the malicious amusement in Elspeth's silver eyes. Leslie's heart sank. Who on earth was this classy vision, impeccably dressed, serene and beautiful? Her face was perfect, as was the smooth bell of her blonde hair. Leslie had drunk a lot, so that she would have the excuse of asking Hamish for a bed for the night. It was still worth a try. "I'm afraid I'm not in a fit condition to drive this evening," she said. "Don't worry about it," said Priscilla. "I'll put you up at the hotel as my guest." All Leslie could do was to say dismally, "Very kind of you." Priscilla wanted to know all about the murders. Leslie felt forgotten as Hamish described all the murders, and Priscilla listened intently. "Look," she interrupted at last, "I really think I'm fit to drive home." "How rude of me to ignore you like this," said Priscilla. "Hamish, I'll catch up with you tomorrow." When they had gone, Elspeth asked, "Feeling smug?" "No. Why?" "Our forensic expert is after you." Hamish looked uncomfortable. "I think maybe she's just keen on her job. Look, I'll come with you to see Fergus. Has anyone come forward to claim Katrina's body for burial?" "Not that I've heard. I believe Mrs. Wellington was trying to get the villagers to raise money for her funeral, but the general opinion is that a stake through the heart is all that's needed. But I suppose the responsibility will fall on the husband. I gather Fergus is still off work. He's thinking of going back soon. I forgot to ask Jimmy whether Ina was insured. We'll ask tomorrow." Hamish sighed. "I'd better escort you to the hotel. Remember to lock your door, and don't answer without checking downstairs first." Fergus answered the door to them the following morning. He looked a wreck. His eyes were bloodshot, and his shoulders stooped. "Come, Ben," he said. What had happened to Ina's impeccable housekeeping? Empty beer cans lay on the floor, along with the remains of TV dinners. The furniture was covered in a thin layer of dust. "You're not looking very well," commented Hamish. "Ina looked after me real well. I can't cook. I hate shopping. Och, man, I wish she was back." Fergus began to cry. "Wheesht now," said Hamish. "You'll just need to get used to the fact that she's gone." "I'll make a cup of tea," said Elspeth, and she disappeared into the kitchen. "Are you all right, financially?" asked Hamish. "Oh, aye." Fergus gave a great gulping sob and wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Her life was insured." "How much?" £75,000. Thon creature Blair was trying to make me admit I murdered her for the money, but he can't prove otherwise." "Maybe you should take a holiday," said Elspeth. "Get right away." "I can't. Hamish, you've just got to find out who killed my Ina." "Fergus, I think she knew something about the killer," said Hamish. "Didn't she even give you a hint about who it might be?" "No, but we didn't talk all that much, come to think of it. I watched the telly of an evening, and herself would knit, or go out to one of those women's meetings at the kirk." "I want you to keep thinking about it all the same," said Hamish earnestly. "Anything at all she might have said." "Now what?" asked Elspeth when they were outside. The day was still and misty, and little pearls of moisture glinted in her frizzy hair. "I think I'll get back over to Bonner Bridge. Maybe I might pick up something there." "Want me to come with you?" "No, just be careful." Hamish wanted rid of her because he wanted to see Priscilla. He wondered if the old longing for her would ever go away. He returned to the police station to collect his dog and cat, making sure first that no members of the press were lurking about, and then drove to the hotel. The Trommel Castle Hotel had once been the home of the Halbert and Smythes. It was one of those mock Gothic castles that had sprung up in the Highlands in Victoria's reign when landowners wanted to copy Balmoral. Colonel Halbert and Smythe had fallen on hard times, and it was Hamish who had suggested he turn his home into a hotel. The establishment had flourished, and the Colonel was fond of bragging that it had all been his own idea. He asked for Priscilla, and was told she was over in the gift shop, helping the new Polish girl with the stock. Hamish uneasily remembered talking to Elspeth in the lounge, and looking up and seeing that Polish maid. Had she said anything about Elspeth writing the horoscopes? Then he reflected dismally that even if she hadn't, the gossip grapevine of Lochdew had probably found out already. Nessie Curry would have seen to that. He wondered if any of the villagers were protecting someone. He desperately didn't want it to be anyone from the village. He opened the door of the gift shop and went in. Priscilla and a Polish girl were sorting out a box of Shetland wool shawls, all of them as fine as gossamer. "I'm just about finished here," said Priscilla. "Want to talk?" "Yes," said Hamish, "if you can spare the time." She smiled. "I've always got time for you." Hamish turned away to hide the sudden rush of gladness on his face. Priscilla finished giving the girl instructions and then said, "Let's go. I could do with a coffee." Elspeth arrived to pick up her laptop, just as they were both disappearing into the hotel. Straight back to her like a homing pigeon, thought Elspeth. He only said he was going to Bonner to get rid of me. They sat in the lounge. Hamish could remember when it had been the family drawing-room. Priscilla ordered coffee and biscuits and asked, "How far have you got today?" Hamish told her about the interview with Fergus. "It might be an idea to go over and see this paper mill," said Priscilla. "It's just outside Strathbane on this side, isn't it?" "Maybe I'll go there," said Hamish, "although I feel I should really be keeping an eye on Elspeth." "Oh, the horoscopes. How did you find out?" "From the barman. I don't know where he got it from, but don't worry about Elspeth. She's a good reporter, and good reporters know how to take care of themselves. When we finish our coffee, we'll go over." "We?" "Yes, we." Hamish was driving them along the road to Strathbane when he suddenly said, "There's a Land Rover following us, and I think I recognize it. I think it belongs to 2 deer poachers I arrested. They must be out on bail. We might be in for a bit of trouble." "Got your rifle?" "In the back." Priscilla began to climb over into the back of the Land Rover. "What are you doing?" cried Hamish. "I'd feel better if we were armed. Where is the ammo?" "Oh, got it. Are they coming closer?" "Yes, they must have a souped-up engine. I'll call for backup." He looked in the rearview mirror and saw a gun protruding from the passenger side of the pursuing vehicle. "Get down, Priscilla!" he shouted. He felt a blast of cold air as Priscilla lowered one of the windows in the back. "Keep straight, Hamish. Don't swerve. I'm going to shoot their tires out." There was a blast of gunfire, and Priscilla cried, "Got 'em! Stop, Hamish. They've gone off the road." "Stay where you are," said Hamish, jumping out of the Land Rover, but Priscilla joined him, carrying the rifle. Hamish phoned for backup. Then he said to Priscilla, "They're armed. We're not going down there on our own." "How unexciting," said Priscilla calmly. "Can you see where they've gone? It's hard to make out anything in this mist." The poacher's vehicle had gone off the edge of the road and down a steep, heathery slope. "No," said Hamish, "they must have gone down a good way. You're a good shot, Priscilla." "Haven't lost my touch," she said. "Are the dog and cat all right?" "They seem to be. I'll let them out. Is there going to be a fuss about me being with you, Hamish?" "No, I haven't had a day off in ages. I'll say it's my time off. Daviot's such a snob he won't dare complain about you being with me." When an armed squad arrived, headed by Daviot, Hamish waited patiently, thinking of all the paperwork he would have to do if the men had been killed in the crash or even injured. Blair then arrived and was looking about to blast Hamish when he saw Daviot talking to Priscilla, and his face fell. Hamish told him what had happened. "Your day off, is it?" demanded Blair. "And who gave you the permission?" "I did," said Jimmy's voice behind Blair. "Constable Macbeth hasn't had a day off in ages." The mist began to swirl and thin in a rising wind. The leader of the armed force came back up the brae. "Their vehicle's there, but they're long gone. Their Land Rover ran into a big rock right down at the bottom of the hill. The thick heather must have slowed their speed because there's hardly a dent in the vehicle." "I want a full search for them," ordered Daviot. "Hamish, I will let you and Miss Halberton Smythe get on, but I will expect a statement from you by this evening. Do give that rifle to Detective Anderson. If you shot one of the men by mistake, then we will need it for evidence." "I shot the tire out," said Priscilla. "I never miss." She laughed and held out the rifle to Jimmy. A flash went off. Hamish cursed. Elspeth and her photographer were standing at the edge of the group. Elspeth came forward. "I would appreciate a statement, Superintendent Davitt." Davitt forced a smile. Elspeth had always been kind to the police. "Very well, Miss Grant." "Come along, Priscilla," whispered Hamish urgently. "Let's get out of here before Davitt sees the dog and cat. Neither of them has as good a pedigree as you, and Davitt will give me a bollocking for taking them around in a police vehicle." They drove off. When they were well clear of the scene, Priscilla said, "Stop! What is it? Are they back?" "No. I feel a bit sick and shaky." "And here's me thinking you were made of iron. I'll take you back." "No, let's go on. I'll be all right in a minute." The manager of the paperworks, Mr. Benjamin Worthy, looked at them both impatiently when Hamish asked whether Fergus could possibly have left the works unnoticed. "I've been through all this before," he said. Worthy was one of those lowland Scots who should never be put in charge of anyone. He had a brusque, bullying manner. He was small and round, wearing a suit, collar and tie. He had small black eyes and a discontented face. "As I said already, they clock in here and clock out. There is only one way out of this factory for the men, and that is past the security guard at the entrance." "But your trucks go in and out," Hamish pointed out. "Fergus Braid is not a truck driver. He is a machine operator." "Has he got any special friend here?" "Is this necessary?" "Oh, yes." "I'll get the foreman." He bustled out, leaving them in his pretentious office with its framed Rotary Club photographs on the walls and its oversized desk. After what seemed like a long time to Hamish and Priscilla, the door opened and a man in blue overalls came in. "I'm Mike Haggerty," he said, "the foreman. The boss said you had some questions." "Did Fergus Braid have any special friend at the works?" "You could maybe say that was me. We often grabbed a drink after work." "Could Fergus possibly have left the works on the day of his wife's murder without anyone knowing?" The foreman was tall and thin, with thick glasses. A ray of sun shone in the window. The mist had lifted. Hamish noticed a thin film of sweat on Mike's brow. Hamish's eyes sharpened. He decided to guess. "I know you covered for him," he said sternly. "You may as well tell the truth, or I'll haul you in and charge you with impeding the police in their inquiries." "He wouldn't hurt a fly, Fergus wouldn't," blustered Mike. "He only wanted a couple of hours, so I told him he could nip out through the lorry bay at the back." "And why didn't you report this before?" "Because there was one nasty swine or a detective bullying me, and more or less telling me that Fergus had murdered Ina, and Fergus would never do such a thing." "Wait there," ordered Hamish. He nodded to Priscilla, and they stepped outside. With a heavy heart, Hamish took out his phone and called Jimmy. "Great!" enthused Jimmy when Hamish had finished speaking. "Keep an eye on the bugger. I'll be right over." When the foreman was taken away, Hamish sadly went back to the Land Rover with Priscilla and drove off. "I only hope Fergus comes up with an alibi, and a real one this time. I just can't believe that man would murder his wife. Blair will try to pin the other murders on him as well." Chapter 9. The cruelest lies are often told in silence. Robert Louis Stevenson. The arrest of Fergus Braid struck the village like a bombshell. Leslie, opening the newspaper the next day, found a photograph of him on the front page and a different story on the inside. "Highland Bobby attacked by armed poachers," screamed the headline. There was a photograph of Priscilla laughing as she handed the rifle over. Leslie read the story carefully. There was nothing about why Priscilla was on the scene and why she had a rifle. She did not know Priscilla's involvement had been suppressed. Leslie scowled. Priscilla was real competition. All Hamish needed was the support of a strong, ambitious woman who could get him out of that village and into the mainstream of police work. For all his intelligence, she suspected he was shy. She decided she would invite him to her flat in Strathbane for dinner. That way she would be safe from interruptions. Elspeth received a call from the features editor. "I'm sending up Perry Gaunt." "But I've done 2 colour features for you," complained Elspeth. "The editor wants to give Perry a break. Book him a room and show him the ropes. He'll be with you shortly. He set off yesterday. He was planning to spend an overnight in Inverness." Elspeth knew it was futile to protest further. Perry Gaunt was an old Etonian, and his father was a close friend of the London editor. No sooner had she put down the phone in her room than it rang again. It was Mr. Johnson. "There's a Mr. Gaunt asking for you." "I'll be right down," said Elspeth. Perry Gaunt was leaning on the reception desk. He was tall and lean, with thick fair hair and a pleasant face. He was wearing an expensive scarlet anorak over a black cashmere sweater, black cords, and sensible boots. As reporters had little to do with features writers, and as Perry had only recently joined the paper, Elspeth barely knew him. "Elspeth," he said with a smile, "you must be cursing me for moving in on your patch. I read your pieces, and they were damn good." "It's all right," said Elspeth, thawing before that charming smile and noticing his eyes were green. "Mr. Johnson, can you manage a room for Mr. Gaunt?" "He's in luck. One of our guests has just checked out. If you'll just sign these forms, Mr. Gaunt, I'll show you to your room." "I'll wait down here for you," said Elspeth, "and then I'll show you around." Elspeth began to feel quite cheerful. The idea that a murderer might be lurking about, trying to kill her, made her feel uneasy. Hamish Macbeth always seemed to have women around him. Let's see how he likes me being accompanied by Perry. Perry came down. "Right," he said. "Like I said, I've read all your stories as well as your features. The trouble is there doesn't seem to be anything left for me to write about. You seem to have covered it all." "I'll drive you down to the village and introduce you to a few people," said Elspeth. "Have you had much experience of journalism?" "I got a degree in journalism from Lander University in Birmingham. They'll give you a degree in anything. Someone even got a degree in flower arrangement. Before that I got a degree in medieval history from Oxford. Before that I was in the army. I'm quite old to be starting out. I'm 33. I haven't worked on a newspaper before." "So how did you land this one?" asked Elspeth, curious to know whether he would admit to his father's friendship with the editor. "You'll hate me for this. My father is a friend of Josh Appleton." Josh was the London editor. "He spoke to him, and next thing I knew was I had the job in Glasgow. Now you'll despise me for taking it." "It's really no different from what goes on in Glasgow," said Elspeth. "Sons of printers get jobs in reporting when they've got no aptitude whatever." "Well, let's see if I have any talent." They were just crossing the forecourt to Elspeth's car when Priscilla emerged from the gift shop. She was wearing hip-hugging jeans and high boots with a black turtleneck sweater. "Talking about local colour," said Perry, "who the hell is that?" "That is Priscilla Halberton Smythe, daughter of the hotel owner." "Is her nature as beautiful as she looks?" Elspeth felt a pang of jealousy. Men, including Hamish, had only to look at Priscilla, and they forgot that such a lowly creature as Elspeth Grant even existed. "She's actually very kind," said Elspeth. "Married?" "No." He adjusted the passenger seat in Elspeth's car to accommodate his long legs. "I've lost interest." "Why?" "If a woman looks like that, and is the daughter of a hotel owner, and she's not married, there's something up." "Are you married?" "No, divorced. And you?" "Nearly, once. He stood me up." "Useless bastard. Let's go." Elspeth drove straight past Priscilla, who looked as if she expected Elspeth to stop the car and introduce her. "I'll take you down to Loch Dhu," said Elspeth, "and we'll call at the police station first." "I'm dying to meet the local bobby. He's featured in quite a number of stories. I looked Loch Dhu up before I left." Elspeth's heart really warmed to Perry when he exclaimed over the village of Loch Dhu, nestled in front of the loch, with the 2 tall mountains towering behind it. "Why, the place is beautiful." Elspeth, for the first time in ages, was conscious of her appearance. She had her frizzy hair scrunched up on top of her head, she was wearing jeans that were old and baggy, and her sweater under her tweed jacket was faded black from too many washings. "I gather they've got someone for one of the murders, at least," said Perry, "so I'd better hurry up and write something before we're called back." Elspeth stopped at the police station, and they got out of the car. As they approached the kitchen door, Hamish came around from the back, an empty feed pail in his hand. He was followed by Lugs and Sunsy. "A bobby with a pet wildcat," marvelled Perry. "Now there's a bit of colour for a start." "No, you don't," warned Elspeth. "He doesn't like people knowing about that cat in case it gets taken away. Actually, it's quite tame." "Elspeth," said Hamish, joining them, "did you see Blair or Jimmy?" "It's all quiet. The mobile police unit wasn't on the waterfront, and I suppose the press are all down at Strathbane." "And why aren't you there?" "Because Daviot will make one of his pompous statements, and you know what's really going on." "I doubt that," said Hamish bitterly. "Coffee?" "Grand. This is Perry Gaunt, a feature writer, and your coffee's foul." "I've got round to using the percolator, and I've got some decent stuff. Should be ready by now." Perry followed them into the kitchen. He looked around. There was a smell of peat from the stove, and the aroma of fresh coffee. The round kitchen table was covered with a red and white gingham cloth, a present from the Italian restaurant, and gingham curtains hung at the window. Outside, the sun shone as if the Highlands had decided to give the residents a brief respite from winter. Hamish poured mugs of coffee and then set a plate of shortbread on the table. "I'm glad you've got company, Elspeth. I've been worried about you not being guarded." "Why should she be guarded?" asked Perry. Hamish told him about the horoscopes. "Now there's a story!" exclaimed Perry. "No, it's not," snapped Elspeth. "You should know I'm not supposed to write anything at all other than for the Bugle. I can't even translate Euripides in my spare time. Hamish, surely Fergus didn't kill his wife." "The latest is that he sneaked out of work for 2 hours around the time his wife was killed, and he absolutely refused to say where he was. Blair charged him with her murder, but there isn't a single bit of evidence against him. The forensic team's up at the back, taking his place apart, looking for a weapon. He's got money from his wife's insurance, so when they eventually allowed him a lawyer, he called in Agnes Dunn from Inverness. She'll soon have him out on bail. She's a terror. I wanted to investigate further, but Blair found I had a lot of holiday time owing, and he found some regulation that I had to take at least a week. I'm losing heart, Elspeth. I'm weary. Let me know if you get any ideas." "Right," said Elspeth. "I'll start by taking Perry here over to Brakey. If you dig up anything, let me know." Elspeth stopped the car on the shore road outside Brakey. "You see those houses?" she said. "Yes, all boarded up. The tide's got higher every year. At high tide, this road is flooded. You can see where it's being eaten away. A lot of the coastal villages are suffering, but no one does anything. You could maybe put in a bit about that. You know the sort of thing. It's not only a murderer in their midst that the people of Sutherland dread, but another enemy that is taking away their homes, yadda-ya." "Got it." Elspeth drove on to the main street and parked. "I'm hungry. There's a chippy. We could have fish and chips, or haggis and chips, or black pudding and chips, or deep-fried Mars bars. Of course, and deep-fried pizza, too." "You know," said Perry, "the average lifespan of a man in Glasgow is now 57, and they put it down to a diet of the stuff you've just mentioned. I want a drink. What about the Highlanders' Arms over there? They've got meat pies from the bakery that aren't bad." "We'll try that, and you can tell me all about the dead postmistress." Perry had been damned in the Glasgow office as a posh git, but Elspeth found his manner of listening intently, his light accent, and his very green eyes intriguing. One read a lot about people with green eyes in books, particularly American books. Maybe green eyes weren't so unusual in the States, but it was rare to see such vivid green in Britain that was not pale or mixed with brown. Her mind turned briefly to Hamish. He blew hot and cold, and any time they seemed to be getting close, he always turned away to some other woman, usually Priscilla. "Do you really think these murders are connected?" Perry asked. "I'm not so sure about the one at Bonner Bridge, but the others, yes. Katrina Beldam was hated, Ina probably knew something, and the silly postmistress bragged that she did. Do we still write postmistress, or do we have to write postperson? God forbid. Mind you, there's probably some new name like Post Office Executive Manager or something. Ellie lived above the shop. Let's go round there and see if some relative is cleaning up, someone she might have said something to. You're doing Hamish Macbeth's job." No, I'm doing my own. I'm a reporter, remember. You haven't eaten your pie. Perry looked round the dismal, dirty pub. I'm frightened too. If this frightens you, some of the places in Glasgow will scare your socks off. Come on. Elspeth found the street door leading to Ellie's flat standing open. They went up the stairs. The flat door was open as well. A small woman was standing in the living room putting stuff into a packing case. "Excuse me," said Elspeth. The woman straightened up. She was wearing a floral pinafore over a dun-coloured sweater and dark blue polyester slacks. She was small and wiry, with a pug face and grey hair. "What do you want?" "We're from the Daily Bugle." "Sod off." Perry moved in front of Elspeth. "I know it must distress you to be approached by the press at such a time, but I think Miss Ellie Macpherson should be remembered not as a murder victim, but as a real live person." He gave his charming smile. "More to the point, you seem to have a lot of work, and we could help you." She looked up at him for a long moment, and then, to Elspeth's surprise, she smiled, exposing a set of dazzlingly white dentures. "I could do with the help. I'm Betty Macpherson, Ellie's sister. Wouldn't think so, would you? She was a great bean-pole of a lass. I am Perry Gaunt, and this is my colleague Elspeth Grant. Maybe we could make you a cup of tea, then you can take a rest and tell us what to do." "You're right kind for an Englishman," said Betty. "Tea would be nice." "I'll get it," said Elspeth. When she returned from the kitchen with the tea things, Perry was on his knees packing china ornaments. "I don't want any of her stupid books," said Betty. Which, indeed. "I don't want that crystal ball, either." Elspeth poured tea into mugs. Then she picked up the crystal ball and gazed into it. "Someone would pay you for this," she said. Suddenly she was engulfed with a wave of hate, fear, and anger. She dropped the ball on the carpet, where it rolled over to Perry. He looked curiously at Elspeth's white face. "What is it?" Elspeth shook her head as if to clear it. "Nothing. I felt queasy. Must have been that pie." He picked up the ball and put it back on the table. Elspeth wished she had brought the photographer. The crystal ball had been the murder weapon. She had her own camera in her bag, but she dreaded picking up the ball again. She wondered why forensics had released it. She thought they kept murder weapons forever. "I'm surprised they gave that thing back to you," she said, pointing to the ball. "Oh, that's not the murder weapon," said Betty. "I wouldn't have such a thing around. She must have had the two. If you think I could get any money for it, pack it up." "I hope this is not too painful for you," said Elspeth. "But did your sister tell you anything that might lead you to suspect she knew the murderer?" "We didn't talk much. We were like chalk and cheese. I think Ellie should have gone on the stage and got it out of her system. She would tell any lie to get attention. I mind when she was just a wee lass, her opening the fridge door and standing there in the light from the fridge, graciously inclining her head as if accepting an award. This is what comes of her lies." A tear rolled down Betty's cheek. "Drink your tea," said Perry, "and I'll get on with packing things up." Now that there seemed nothing further to find out, Elspeth could only marvel at Perry's patience as he deftly wrapped kitchen stuff and other odds and ends and put them into packing cases. When they eventually left, Perry said, "Now I really am starving." "Let's go back to the hotel," said Elspeth. "Clary the chef will rustle something up for you." Hamish was sitting in the lounge with Priscilla when Elspeth and Perry entered. Elspeth's face was flushed and her eyes were shining. Her face fell when she saw Priscilla. She waited for the inevitable. Perry would forget all about her and be fascinated by Priscilla. She introduced Perry to Priscilla and said, "Perry's desperate for something to eat." Priscilla rose to her feet. "What about soup and a plate of sandwiches?" "That would be great." "I'll tell Clary." When Priscilla had left, Elspeth said, "I thought you'd be out trying to find out where Fergus really was." "We were just going over my notes," said Hamish defensively. Perry and Elspeth sat down. "Could he have been with a woman?" asked Elspeth. "He wouldn't want to say so, would he? I mean, with his wife just dead." Hamish stared at her for a long moment. "The brothel," he said. "What if Fergus was one of Fiona McNulty's clients? He wouldn't have the time to go all the way over to Bonnybridge, and she was still in Cnothan when Ina was murdered. Maybe he went to Cnothan where she used to be. I'll get down to the newspaper and get a photograph of him from Matthew and see if anyone over there saw him." He almost expected Elspeth to volunteer to go with him, but she said, "Good idea," and settled back in her chair. Having secured a photograph, Hamish was driving towards Knothen when his mobile phone rang. He stopped at the side of the road and answered it. It was Leslie. "This is short notice, Hamish," she said. "I wonder whether you would like to come over to my place tonight for dinner." Hamish thought rapidly. Priscilla was as cool as ever, and Elspeth seemed enamoured of the feature writer. "What time?" he asked. 8 o'clock. Here's the address." Hamish wrote it down. "See you then," he said, and rang off. He drove up to where the mobile home used to be, and once more called at the croft where the gnome-like man lived. He showed him Fergus's photograph, but the man shook his head. Hamish tried several of the other outlying crofts, but without success. The trouble was, he thought, that to get to the mobile home, Fergus would not have needed to go through the town. Then he had an idea. If Fergus had been in the habit of visiting Fiona, would he have known that she would have a supply of condoms, or, on his first visit, would he call in at the chemist in Knothen to get a packet? He drove into town and went to the chemist. The pharmacist, Mr. Hepworth, was standing behind the counter with a young female assistant. Hamish showed them the photograph of Fergus and asked if they could remember him ever buying condoms. Mr. Hepworth shook his head, but the girl giggled and said, "Oh, I mind him." "Tell me about it," urged Hamish. "He looked around for a long time. Then he bought toothpaste. Then he wandered around again. The condoms are right here on the counter. He kept staring at them as he was paying for the toothpaste, and his face was bright red, and he was sweating, although it was a cold day. I took pity on him, so I picked up a packet and said, 'Can I wrap this for you as well?' He said aye, paid for them, and fairly fled out of the shop. I mind it well, 'cause I had a good laugh about it with my friends that evening." "When was this?" asked Hamish. "Last September. I can't remember the exact day." Hamish took a note of her name and address, and then left, deep in thought. Fergus had been in the habit of visiting Fiona. That was where he might have been on the afternoon his wife was being murdered. He went back to the police station, collected Sonsy and lugs, and drove to Strathbane. He stopped in the car park and phoned Jimmy. "What is it?" asked Jimmy. "I've finished for the day, and I want to get to the pub." "I'll meet you there." In the pub, Jimmy listened carefully and then said bitterly, "Trust you to throw a spanner in the works. If you want to make my life even more miserable, talk to her." He pointed to a woman at a corner table who was working on a laptop. "That's Fergus's lawyer, Agnes Dunn. She's all set to get him out on bail. I'll just stay here and get drunk." Hamish approached Agnes Dunn. She was a hatchet-faced woman in her 40s, wearing a power suit. "Yes?" she demanded. Hamish sat down opposite her and told her about Fergus's visits to Fiona. Get him to say that's where he was, and if he told anyone at work where he was going, and if he maybe went into the town afterwards and might have been seen in one of the shops. She switched off her laptop and closed it down. "Come with me," she said, "although I hope they don't try to pin the murder at Bonner Bridge on him now." Jimmy swallowed his drink and went with them. To Hamish's relief, Blair was nowhere in sight. The duty officer led the way down to the cells in the basement. Fergus was sitting with his head in his hands. He looked up when they entered. Hamish sat down on the bed and faced him. "You're a right fool, Fergus. Why didn't you just tell the truth? I now know you were visiting Fiona McNulty." "You can't tell anyone, Hamish," exclaimed Fergus. "Oh, man, the shame o' it. They'll never let me inside the kirk again." "Listen to me, Fergus. You have been charged with the murder of your wife. I am sure they are trying to pin the other murders on you as well. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison if you don't speak up now. Now, on the day of Ina's murder, did you go to Fiona?" "Aye," he mumbled. "Now think very carefully. Did you go into the village?" "Aye, I did that. I'll never forget it. I thought she might say something." "Who? Where?" "It was after, I went into that cafe on the main street, and I ordered a mutton pie and peas and some tea." He looked at Hamish with a sort of bewildered innocence. "It makes you hungry." "Sex?" "Aye. That lassie, Skye, stupid name, herself was serving. She says, "My dad says you're getting to be a regular around these parts." I was that feart. I leapt to my feet and knocked the teapot onto the floor. I threw some money on the table and ran for it. "You see how simple it is," said Hamish. "I'll get over there right now and check it out." Leslie looked with pride at her dinner table. It was set with her finest china, and a bottle of good claret nestled in its basket, ready to pour. She had brushed her red-gold hair until it shone. She was wearing a white silk blouse with a low neckline and her late mother's pearls. Pearl drops hung from her small ears. A black velvet skirt went to ankle-length, just showing a pair of high-heeled black patent shoes with thin straps. She was wearing a scarlet thong, and wriggled a little with the discomfort of it. Leslie went into the bathroom and sprayed herself with Givenchy's Hot. 8 o'clock came and went. She began to pace up and down. She was just about to phone Hamish when the doorbell rang. She opened the door and stared at Hamish. He was wearing his uniform, and his dog and cat were at his feet. "What are they doing here?" she demanded, pointing at the animals. "I'm right sorry, Leslie. I didn't have time to take them home. They're right hungry, and they need some water. If you wouldn't mind—" She slammed the door in his face, rushed into the bathroom, and glared in fury at her reflection in the mirror. "The man's a hick!" she screamed. Now she felt she knew why this man had avoided promotion. He was nothing more than a Highland peasant. She had gone to all this trouble. Not only had he turned up in his shabby uniform, but he'd had the cheek to bring along his weird pets and expect her to feed them. Hamish stood outside the door. He wondered whether to knock again and ask her what on earth was up with her. Then he shrugged. He was tired and hungry. He helped Sonsie and Lugs into the Land Rover. "Don't you worry," he said. "We'll find a chippy." He was pleased with the day's work. Skye had remembered the incident, and had also remembered the day, because that had been the day of her birthday. Fergus was a lucky man. Strathbane might consider themselves back to square one, but Hamish had the advantage of never having believed Fergus guilty in the first place. He bought Sonsie a fish supper at the chip shop, and as a treat he bought Lugs a black pudding supper. Lugs was partial to black pudding. He also bought 2 bottles of mineral water. He settled for a haggis supper for himself. He drove up out of Strathbane and stopped on the moors. He poured the mineral water into bowls for his pets before eating his deep-fried slice of haggis and his chips. He was too tired to really worry about what was up with Leslie. As he drove off again, he saw flakes of snow beginning to dance in front of the windscreen. At first they swirled down hypnotically, but as he gained the bridge into Loch Dhu, the snow was blowing horizontally on a screaming gale. He was glad to be home. He lit the stove and settled down at the kitchen table with a glass of whisky. He decided that in the morning he would go over all the reports and see if there was anything he had missed. Elspeth twisted and turned that night, unable to get to sleep. She felt she was falling in love with Perry. She knew in her gypsy soul that one can always pull back before it is too late, and yet her very interest in Perry had freed her from any thoughts about Hamish Macbeth. And it was great to be free of that. Let the poor idiot remain enraptured by Priscilla until the end of his days. She just didn't care any more. The gale screamed around the hotel. She was in one of the turret rooms, and it appeared to be getting the main force of the wind. Elspeth decided to try to read herself to sleep. She switched on the bedside light. It was covered by a dainty, rose-coloured, fringed shade, and did not give much illumination. She thought it would be a good idea to get out of bed and switch on the overhead light. Then she stared at the door. Her heart started to beat fast. She could swear someone was slowly turning the handle. She picked up the phone. The line was dead. She knew she had locked the door, but what if someone was prepared to break it open, or had found a pass-key? Elspeth scrambled out of bed and searched in her handbag for her mobile. She switched it on. The little screen said no signal. The storm must have damaged reception from the local mobile phone tower. There was only one thing for it. Elspeth screamed and screamed, hoping her screams might be heard above the roar of the storm. A sound of running feet. a banging at the door, Perry's blessed voice shouting, "Are you all right?" Elspeth hurtled to the door and opened it. "Thank God!" she cried, and threw herself into Perry's arms. "What's the matter?" he asked. "I saw the door handle turn and thought the murderer had come for me." "Let's phone the police." "The phones are down, and Hamish would never get up here in this blizzard." "If it was someone, and if Hamish can't get up here, then whoever it was can't get away. Come on, let's get downstairs." Elspeth put on a dressing-gown and slippers. She thought, illogically, why am I wearing a pair of striped pyjamas and this ratty old dressing-gown? I ought to be wearing something from Victoria's Secret. Perry took her hand in a warm clasp, and they hurried down the stairs. The night porter was asleep at the desk. "Wake up," said Perry, shaking him. "Someone's tried to attack Miss Grant, and that person might still be in the hotel. Hit the fire alarm. Get everyone down here." Mr. Johnson and Priscilla were the first to arrive. Priscilla was wearing a long pale green silk dressing-gown that seemed to have been moulded to her figure. She did not have a hair out of place. Perry quickly explained what was wrong. Other guests gathered in the hall, and then some hungover reporters and photographers, and the few members of the staff who lived in. "Someone tried to get into Miss Grant's room," said Mr. Johnson. "I want you all to search the hotel to see if you can find a stranger. Also keep looking out of the upper windows in case someone is trying to escape through the snow." The hotel was searched from top to bottom. It took a long time because the old building was full of unexpected nooks and cupboards and storerooms. Everyone ended up in the hall again, weary and cross, some reporters saying loudly that it was probably Perry trying to get into Elspeth's knickers. "You better share my room for the rest of the night," said Perry. "It's got twin beds." "It's all right," said Priscilla. "There's a free room next to mine." "I really am beginning to hate you," thought Elspeth, but she smiled and said, "Perry and I have stories to discuss. I'll share his room." When Elspeth settled into the twin bed in Perry's room, she said in a small voice, "Do you think I was imagining things? I heard one of the maids say you were psychic. Did you sense anything?" "No. I get strange feelings from time to time, but I can't seem to conjure them up when I need them. It'll be all right. We'll try to get to the police station in the morning. Go to sleep." If this were a romance, thought Elspeth, he would take me in his arms and say he would protect me for the rest of his life. A few minutes later, Perry let out a gentle snore. So much for romance. Elspeth turned on her side and drifted down into a dream where a dark figure was chasing her along endless corridors. Priscilla was thinking of Perry. He was so attractive and so suitable. He was everything Hamish Macbeth was not. She wondered if there was anything going on with Elspeth. Elspeth often looked as if she bought her clothes exclusively in the cheapest type of thrift shop, but there was no denying that men did seem to be attracted to her. "I'll need to think up some way to have him to myself," thought Priscilla. "Elspeth's bound to go off on her own some time or other." Leslie sighed with relief when she reached the forensic lab the following morning. She'd had to walk because the streets of Strathbane had not yet been cleared. Bruce, the head of the lab, was the only other person there. "The lazy sods are using the snow as an excuse not to come to work," he complained, as Leslie pulled off her boots and put on a pair of dry, flat shoes. "Well, that's Fergus Braid off the hook." "What?" "I was in the pub last night. Blair was furious, trying to say Macbeth made it up." "What are you talking about?" "Last evening, Macbeth found a witness over in Knothen who had seen Fergus at the time of his wife's murder." "Did you say yesterday evening?" "Yes. Why?" "Just wondered." Leslie bit her lip in vexation. So that was why he had still been in uniform and had brought those wretched animals with him. He must be furious with her. She decided to phone him. "The phones aren't working, and in case you haven't noticed, we haven't any electricity either," said Bruce. "There's nothing we can do until the power comes on." "Haven't we got a generator?" "No," lied Bruce, who had in fact borrowed it for his home during an earlier power cut and forgotten to bring it back. On the same clear and very cold morning, Elspeth and Perry borrowed skis and managed to make their way to the police station. Hamish listened intently. He knew Elspeth well enough not to accuse her of imagining things. When Elspeth and Perry had finished talking, he said, "I can't understand how someone would get up to the hotel in a raging blizzard unless it was one of the guests. Which guests who were here at the murder of Katrina are still at the hotel?" "I don't know," said Elspeth. "But I do," said Priscilla from the doorway. Elspeth scowled. She saw the way Priscilla looked at Perry. Couldn't that damn female leave her just one man? "Who are they?" asked Hamish. "Just the one, a Mr. Gary. We checked on him." Hamish had piles of papers spread out in front of him on the table. "Ah, here we are. Mr. Dominic Gary, stockbroker, likes hill walking, 55 years old. He's pretty fit. Yes, he's tall and thin, does a lot of walking. We borrowed the last of the skis, so I don't suppose he'll be going anywhere today. I'll get up to the hotel and have a word with him." "We'd better get started on your colour piece, Perry," said Elspeth. "We'll go along to the Highland Times and use the desk there." "I heard the snow-plough going past," said Priscilla. "You might be able to get up there in the Land Rover, Hamish. I'll come with you." As they arrived at the hotel forecourt, Priscilla said, "That's Mr. Gary, just leaving." Hamish jumped down from the Land Rover and called out, "Mr. Gary, a word with you." Gary was wearing an expensive anorak over thick knee breeches and sturdy boots. "I was just going out for a walk," he said. "Isn't it beautiful in the snow?" "If you wouldn't mind coming back into the hotel. It won't take long," said Hamish. When they were seated in a corner of the lounge, Hamish waited until Gary had shrugged off his anorak and said, "As you will have heard, Mr. Gary, there have been murders committed." "And what's that got to do with me?" "I am just asking everyone around if they might have seen anything," said Hamish soothingly. "Now, I see from my notes that you are a stockbroker from London. I am curious as to why you are up here on such a long holiday. This hotel is expensive." "Do I have to tell you?" Hamish's eyes sharpened. "Of course." "I had a nervous breakdown. You can check with my psychiatrist. I'll give you his number. He suggested I take a long break as far away from London as possible. I have plenty of money, and this has been a very healing experience." "What caused the breakdown?" "I was wrongly accused of insider trading. By the time my name was cleared and I was settling down, my wife asked for a divorce. Come up to my room. I am going to give you phone numbers to check my story, and then will you please leave me alone? I will also telephone my psychiatrist and give him permission to speak to you. I gather the phones are working again." Hamish, when he got back to the police station, telephoned the psychiatrist. As he listened, his heart sank. He had been hoping that it would turn out some crazed outsider had been responsible, but the psychiatrist confirmed that Gary had indeed had a nervous breakdown. He said that, in his opinion, Gary was a gentle man, not suited for the cutthroat life of the city. The divorce had been the final straw. He had private means. He warned Hamish not to upset him. Hamish gloomily went back to studying his notes. Surely somewhere, in the middle of all this information, was something he had missed. His eyes fell on the statement he had taken from Timmy Teviot. The man hadn't been lying about the poachers, but there had been something else he hadn't been saying. There had been something at the back of his eyes, and Hamish was suddenly sure he knew about the brothel. Timmy wouldn't be working today. The road right round the loch wouldn't be cleared yet, but he decided to put his skis on and call on Timmy. The phone rang. It was Leslie. "Hamish, I am very sorry," she was beginning. "Talk to you later," said Hamish. "Got to rush," and put the phone down. The phone immediately rang again. "I told you—" Hamish was beginning when Elspeth's voice came down the line. "It's me, Elspeth. Hamish, while Perry was writing his piece, I've been thinking and thinking about the murders. The one thing that seems to tie them all together is sex." "Sex? Think about it." Chapter 10. The Beaton Men Come into Their Own. John Masefield. After a long and weary trudge round the loch, Hamish was irritated to be told that Timmy had gone to the pub in Loch Dhu. The ground round the loch was flat, so there were no slopes to ski down. He wished he had worn his snowshoes instead. The sun was glittering blindingly on the snow. Loch Dhu looked like a Christmas card, but that morning he was in no mood to admire it. When he reached the cleared waterfront, he took off his skis, carried them to the police station, and propped them against the wall. Then he made his way to the pub. He went straight up to Timmy, who was propping up the bar. "You," said Hamish curtly, "follow me to the station." To Timmy's nervous demands of, "What's up? What have I done?" Hamish only replied, "In the station." When they were settled in the office, Hamish began. "You've been holding out on me, Timmy." "Me? Man, I telled you about them poachers." "So you did, but you didn't tell me you knew about Fiona McNulty." There was something like relief at the back of Timmy's eyes. "Oh, well, I didn't want to go getting any of the men in the village into trouble. Like Fergus." "Aye, he was the only one I knew about." "And how did you know about him?" "We got drinking one night, and he told me." Hamish's eyes sharpened. "There's something else he told you that you aren't letting on. Out with it, Timmy, or I'll take you down to Strathbane and let Blair deal with you." "I can't go betraying the man's confidence." "Then we're off to see Blair." "Och, anything but that. But you didn't hear it from me." "Out with it." "I can't think it's got anything to do with the murder of his poor wife." "Spit it out." "It sounds right daft now, but she used to beat him." "Ina? That wee woman?" "Fact. He had a sore dunt to the head, and he was saying it happened at work, but when he'd had a few jars, he says to me that Ina hit him with the frying pan." "Why did she do that?" asked Hamish. "She'd learned from one of the women that he'd been seen one night up at the witch's place." "You should have told me this before. Off with you, Timmy. I may be talking to you later." Hamish phoned Jimmy. "I thought you were supposed to be on holiday," said Jimmy. "I am. Is Fergus out?" "Yes, he's at home." "Thanks. Hamish, if you know anything, I'll let you know. Talk to you later." Hamish walked up to Fergus's home and knocked at the door. Fergus answered. "Not again," he said. "I'm no going back to Strathbane." "Just a wee chat," said Hamish. "Come, Ben." Hamish edged his way around bulging rubbish sacks on the front step. "Been cleaning?" he asked. "Aye. When I came back and saw the mess I'd been living in, I couldn't bear the sight of it. Poor Ina would have gone mad." Hamish took off his cap and sat down. "Fergus, did Ina beat you?" "What a thing to say, and her not cold in her grave." "Fergus, you got into trouble by not telling the truth. Out with it." "Well, maybe," Fergus mumbled. "You were seen going to Katrina Beldam's." "Och, that was silly. She gave me this stuff, and all it did was make my balls itch." "And Ina found out you'd been there?" "Yes, someone told her." "And what did she do?" "She hit me with the frying pan." "And was she in the habit of hitting you?" Fergus hung his head. Then he burst out with, "What could I do, Hamish? I couldn't hit a woman. I couldn't talk about it. Me, a big man, being hit by a wee woman. The shame o' it." "What about Fiona McNulty? Did Ina know about her?" "Maybe." "What maybe?" "The day she was murdered, she left a note for me." "Fergus, for God's sake, man, the things you've been keeping from me. Have you got the note?" "No, I burnt it." "What did it say?" "It said something like, 'I know what you've been up to, and you're for it.' I got the idea you were relieved when she was killed." "I was that. I'm free at last. That's what I thought. But you know what it's like. You read about old lags who feel so strange and lost when they're let out of prison after a long sentence that they can't wait to get in again. I don't seem to have thought for myself or acted for myself for a long time." "But you went to Fiona." Fergus looked at Hamish with pleading eyes. "Fiona wasn't really a whore. She just did a bit on the side for some fellows. She was warm and nice. Hamish, you may as well have the lot. I hadn't had any sex since my honeymoon. When we got back, herself says I'm not having any more of that nastiness." "You had grounds for a divorce." "This is Loch Dhu, Hamish. I'm not the only one." "Who else visited Fiona?" "I don't know, and that's the truth. I never asked her. I wanted to keep up the lie that she was mine only." Fergus began to cry, great gulping sobs. Hamish handed him a handkerchief and waited in sympathetic silence until Fergus had cried himself out. "Just look at me," said Fergus, "crying over a whore when I can't even shed a tear for my own wife." "Here's what I want you to do," said Hamish. "I want you to go to Dr. Brodie and get him to recommend a good psychiatrist. You need to talk all this out." "I'm not mad." "No, but you'll drive yourself mad with the load of guilt you're carrying. Now, do you have any idea who's been committing these murders?" "Hamish, I swear to God, I haven't a clue." Elspeth was wondering what to do about Perry. They both had been summoned back to the office. Elspeth had pointed out that the road south was still impassable in a lot of places. The news editor told her to get back as soon as she could and to bring Perry with her. She was anxious to remove Perry from Priscilla's orbit. Perry was easy and charming to both of them. Elspeth was only comforted by the fact that she had overheard Priscilla inviting Perry for dinner, and Perry had refused, saying he still had work to do. In order to get Perry out of the hotel, she suggested they go down to the police station. "It would be a shame," said Elspeth, "to get on the road and then find out Hamish had solved the murders. Then we've got Katrina's funeral later on." "Do you think he will solve the murders?" asked Perry. "He always has in the past. Mind you, there's a first time for everything." Hamish was in his office. He had pinned a large sheet of paper up on the wall with the names of the 4 murdered women, with arrows pointing to each name from a centre circle in which he had written the one word in heavy black ink: sex. "Come in," he said. "I'm just trying to work something out. Now, Archie McLean said to me, 'We don't do sex in Loch Dhu.' I thought that was funny at the time, but think of it. If that's the case, there must be a good few sexually repressed men around." "Including you," said Elspeth. "Don't be cheeky. Let me think. Wait a bit. What if I've been looking at this the wrong way round?" "The funeral's today," interrupted Elspeth. "Whose funeral?" "Katrina. She's still legally married to Rory, so he's agreed to stump up. Don't suppose any of the village will be going, but Perry and I may as well do a piece. Mrs. Wellington will be there, of course." "That's it," exclaimed Hamish. "Mrs. Wellington. The village women were complaining to her about Katrina. What if I should be looking for a woman instead of a man? Take Katrina's murder. Leslie said that provided the weapon was sharp enough, then a woman could have done it. All the murders seem to have been done in a frenzy of hate. Now, if Ina wasn't one of the murderees, I might have thought it was her." "Why Ina?" "Never you mind. When's the funeral?" 3 o'clock. "Maybe see you there. I've got to dash." As Hamish walked up to the manse, he marvelled at how little he actually knew of what went on behind the lace curtains of the cottages in Loch Dhu. Whoever would have thought that Fergus was a battered husband? Mrs. Wellington greeted him with a curt, "I'm busy." "It is very important," said Hamish. Mrs. Wellington always made him feel nervous. She invited him into the manse's vast and old-fashioned kitchen. "Don't sit down," she barked as Hamish removed his hat. He turned and faced her. "Before Katrina was murdered, a lot of the women came to you about their husbands visiting her. Was there any particular one that was more upset than the others? If, as I think you are trying to pin any of these murders on the respectable ladies of Loch Dhu, then I have nothing to say to you. There have been 4 murders, and maybe there'll be another one if you don't help. Then look for a man. Women are the gentler sex, or have you forgotten?" "Did you know that Ina Braid beat her husband?" Mrs. Wellington had been rolling pastry. She glared at him and brandished the rolling pin. Hamish took a quick step back. "Either Fergus is really guilty, or all this has turned his brain. I knew Ina Braid, and she was a gentle soul." Hamish returned to the station. The wind was rising and blowing powdery snow from the tops of drifts. The sky above was getting darker. Villagers were queuing at Patel's, frightened that more snow would mean that deliveries of goods wouldn't get through. In the police station he sought out 2 campers' gas lamps and placed them in readiness on the kitchen table. More snow would probably mean a power cut. Sonsie and Lugs crashed through the flap on the door. Hamish could see that their coats were embedded with hard little snowballs. He filled a basin with warm water and patiently began to remove the snow from them. Then he put more peat in the stove before pouring himself a cup of coffee, going into the office, getting his notes, and once more spreading them out on the kitchen table. The snow meant that he would have at least the whole of what was left of the day free from interruptions. Then he remembered Katrina's funeral. Surely it wouldn't take place on such a day. He phoned Mrs. Willington. "No, of course not," she said, in answer to his query. "Mr. McBride is unable to get further north because of the snow, and we are going to wait until he arrives." "What—" began Hamish, when the phone went dead. He went back to the kitchen and tried the lights. No success. The snow piling up against the kitchen window was cutting out any light. He lit the lamps and hoped that his sheep were safely in the shelter he had built for them. He suddenly cursed, remembering he hadn't given them their winter feed. Hamish strapped on his snowshoes and collected 2 buckets of feed he had ready by the door. He put on a coat and woolen hat, opened the door, and plunged into the roaring white storm outside. He felt a superstitious shudder as he made his way up the hill at the back. The wind was screaming and howling. It was as if the old gods had decided to take back Sutherland, take it away from the petty grip of man, and restore it to a wilderness. He was pleased that the low wooden shelter he had built for the sheep was holding up. He poured their feed into a trough, stood for a moment watching them, and then headed back to the station. Elspeth and Perry struggled back to the hotel. "We'll never get out of here," said Perry. "Not that I care much." But that charming smile of his was not only for Elspeth, but also for Priscilla, who had come to meet them. "Clary's made some mulled wine," said Priscilla. "Like some?" "Lovely," said Perry. "Wait till we get out of these wet clothes. My feet feel like 2 blocks of ice, and we're dripping melted snow all over the place. Come on, Elspeth." Priscilla watched them go. Was there anything going on between them? Her father had got on the phone to friends in the south and had found out all about Perry's impeccable background and had started nagging his daughter to do something. Usually that would have been enough to put Priscilla off, but she was becoming more and more fascinated by Perry. The hotel generator could be heard faintly through the noise of the storm outside. She paced up and down the hall. What was taking them so long? Had they gone to bed together? Perish the thought. Priscilla decided that she had better retreat to the lounge and look as if she were reading a magazine. It was a full half-hour before they both appeared. "I'll get the wine," said Priscilla. "Don't you just ring the bell?" asked Perry. "Only a few of the staff live in, and they are cleaning the rooms." "She moves like a dancer," said Perry appreciatively. "Very graceful girl." "I brought down my laptop," said Elspeth in a dull little voice. "I thought that after we have our mulled wine we could go through everything. There might be a clue somewhere." "All right. At least if someone wants to kill you, they won't get anywhere near the hotel in this weather." "Something's up." Elspeth cocked her head to one side like a bird. Then she ran out of the lounge, through the hall and out the open door. Very faintly, muffled by the roar of the storm, she heard the church bell. But it couldn't be ringing for Katrina. She had already checked that the funeral was off. The bell, apart from Sundays, was only rung for an emergency. This she told to Perry, who had appeared beside her. "I'd better get back down there," she said. "There might be a story. I'll get the photographer." "Elspeth, I am not going out into that screaming wilderness again." "Suit yourself." The emergency was that Mr. Patel's small son, Bertie, had gone missing. In answer to his frantic cries for help, Hamish had rushed to the church and rung the bell, telling the village men who had struggled to answer its summons to start searching. He then did a quick check of the bedroom that Bertie shared with his brothers. On Bertie's pillow was an open book, the story of the Ice Queen. Bertie was only 6 years old and a dreamy boy. Had he gone out to look for the mythical queen? Priscilla came back with a tray of mulled wine. "Where's Elspeth?" "Our intrepid reporter thought she heard the church bell ringing. Her photographer is refusing to move." Priscilla put down the tray. "I'll go after her. She shouldn't be on her own, and something serious must have happened." "Now I feel like a heel," said Perry. "I'll come with you." Elspeth skied towards the village. She was halfway there when she realized the wind was slacking. She dug her poles in and came to an abrupt stop. Something was lying on the road. She went forward. It was a child. A faint whimper escaped it. Elspeth dragged the child to its feet. A tear-stained, brown face looked up at her. "You're Patel's boy," said Elspeth. "What are you—" "Never mind. I'm going to stoop down, and I want you to get on my back." "Right. Now hang on very tightly, and I'll get you home." She dug in her poles and sped down the road, nearly taking off at the humpbacked bridge. Elspeth went straight to Patel's. Mrs. Patel burst into tears as her boy slid down off Elspeth's back. "Get blankets," said Elspeth. "I'll go and get Dr. Brodie." Word spread rapidly that the boy had been found. Matthew Campbell had taken a photograph of Elspeth as she sped into the village with the boy on her back. He would add it to his stories about the blizzard and send a copy out to the Nationals. By the time Elspeth returned with Dr. Brodie, the shop was full of people, including Perry and Priscilla. A grateful Mr. Patel hugged Elspeth, tears of gratitude running down his cheeks. "Bertie had been reading a story about the Ice Queen. He asked me where she lived. He said he had seen her in the shop. He meant you, Miss Halberton Smythe, because you look like the pictures in his book. So I said that she lived in that big castle up on the hill." "Take me upstairs to the boy," said Dr. Brodie. Hamish had been standing listening. He suddenly laughed. "The Ice Queen? That is a very good description." "Shut up," said Priscilla, and walked out of the shop. The following morning Hamish went back to studying his notes and reports until his head ached. If the murderer was a woman, then he was looking at someone in the village. He went back to the old guest list for the hotel. No hope there. Then he went into the office and looked at the chart on the wall. 4 murders, all leading down to the sign that read sex. Wait a minute, he thought. Have I been missing the obvious? The one person with a clear motive is Fergus. What if Skye in the cafe had been lying? Or what if she wanted a bit of the limelight? That was the trouble with so many reality programs on television. Everyone wanted fame these days without necessarily working at anything to achieve it. Maybe she had seen herself called as a witness at a murder trial and being photographed afterwards. Hamish wondered if the roads had been ploughed all the way over to Knotton. He dressed warmly, got into the Land Rover, and drove off. He was in luck. The roads had been ploughed. The sun was low in the sky. It never rose very high in the winter. He parked in the main street and entered the cafe. The owner said it was Skye's day off, but that she lived in the last house at the top of the main street. Hamish went there and rang the bell. A thin, faded, blonde woman wearing too much makeup answered the door. "I am Police Constable Macbeth from Lochdew," said Hamish. "Might I be having a wee word with Skye?" "What's she done?" "Nothing, as far as I know," said Hamish mildly. "Am I talking to Skye's mother?" "Yes." "When's her birthday?" 10th of June. Why are you asking?" Hamish's heart felt suddenly heavy. "Never mind. Just call her." "Go in and have a seat. I'll get her." After a few moments, Skye slouched in. She was a sulky-looking girl, chewing a great wad of gum. Her hair was dyed an improbable red, and she was thin to the point of anorexia. "You lied to me," said Hamish severely. "I did not. I remember that fellow fine." "It was not your birthday, for a start. Your birthday was in June." "I just said that to make you believe me. But it was in that day, honest." "So what makes you sure it was that day?" "I was going to go clubbing in Strathbane that evening, but the mist got so bad, me and my friends didn't go." "There have been other foggy days," said Hamish severely. "You shouldn't ever lie to the police. If I find out Fergus wasn't in your cafe, I'll be back to arrest you for wasting police time." Hamish drove back to Lochdew. He parked on the waterfront and walked up to Fergus's cottage. Fergus ushered him in. "A dram, Hamish?" "No, this is serious. That girl at the cafe, she lied about the day she saw you being her birthday. Did you get to her in any way? Pay her?" "Hamish, what are you talking about? I was there." "I'm right worried, Fergus. The one thing that connects the 4 women in a way is you. You stood to gain money if your husband-beating wife died. You visited Katrina and Fiona." "Oh, Hamish, will this never end?" "I'll need to go over all your alibis again. I'll go to that paper mill tomorrow and warn that foreman if he's been lying for you, I'll have him arrested." Fergus looked weary. "Do what you must. I've had enough. I've protested my innocence over and over again. I'm going to phone the lawyer. I need protection." "I think you do." Hamish turned in the doorway. A sudden thought struck him. Looking back at Fergus, he couldn't believe the man guilty of anything. "Fergus, do you know of any other man in Lochdu who's being beaten by his wife?" Fergus gave a harsh laugh. "Try next door." "What? The Fremonts? Why didn't you tell me this?" "It's husband beating. It's no murder." Hamish stood outside Fergus's house. Could it be? Could it possibly be? He went to the Fremonts and rang the bell. Colin answered the door. He had a burn mark on the side of his face. "How did you get that burn?" asked Hamish. "Got it at work," said Colin. "Can I come in? I'd like a word with you and the wife." "Tilly's not here." "Where is she?" "She's gone up to the hotel." "Why?" "Women's stuff. She wants Elspeth Grant to read her horoscope." Hamish stared at him and then wheeled about and began to run down to his Land Rover as fast as he could. He drew out his mobile phone as soon as he got into the vehicle. No signal. He put on the siren and raced off out of the village. Mr. Johnson phoned Elspeth, who was working in her room. "Mrs. Fremont is at the reception. She wants to come up and see you." "Why?" "She wants her horoscope read." Elspeth felt gooseflesh rising on her arms. "Tell her to wait in the lounge. I'll be down soon. First, has the Colonel got an old flak jacket anywhere?" "He's away, but I'll ask Priscilla." "Tell her to phone me if she's got one." "What? Please, just do it." Elspeth waited nervously. She tried the phone, still dead. Then there was a knock at the door. "Who is it?" she called. "It's me, Priscilla." Elspeth opened the door. "What do you want with this?" asked Priscilla, holding out an old flak jacket. "Help me on with it, and I'll tell you." Elspeth entered the lounge. She was wearing the flak jacket under an old sweater. Fortunately, the Colonel had last worn his flak jacket years ago, when he was a slim young officer. "Miss Grant," said Tilly, "I'm right sorry to bother you, but I mind you from the days when you did the horoscopes for the Highland Times, and I wondered if I could have a reading." "Please sit down." "No, sit opposite me." "I don't do readings." Elspeth had a sudden inspiration. "But I read palms. Hold out your hands." All the while Elspeth was thinking, she can't be a murderer. She looks so small and inoffensive. But Tilly's eyes were glittering with an odd light. She held out her hands. Hamish had nearly reached the hotel when he saw the lights of a car racing towards him. He slowed down and saw that Priscilla was the driver. He stopped. She climbed out of her car, shouting, "Tilly Fremont's at the hotel, getting Elspeth to tell her horoscope." "I know," Hamish shouted back. "Let me past." Priscilla swung her car to the side of the one-track road, and Hamish roared off past her. Elspeth stared down at the pair of housework, reddened hands and said, "I see violence and murder in your hands, Mrs. Fremont." 3 guests came into the lounge. Tilly snatched her hands away. "You're nothing but a fraud," she said. She got up and began to march away. Elspeth followed her. She desperately wanted Tilly to do or say something to betray herself. Tilly went out of the hotel and walked towards her car. "Well, good night," said Elspeth, and she turned to walk back into the hotel. A police siren sounded. Driving into the hotel, Hamish Macbeth thought he would never forget the sight that met his eyes. As Elspeth turned away, Tilly took a pair of scissors out of her pocket, ran forward, and stabbed Elspeth viciously in the back. Elspeth fell face forward in the snow. Hamish jumped down from the Land Rover and grabbed Tilly and threw her to the ground. She screamed and clawed at him. He finally got handcuffs on her. Mr. Johnson came running out. Priscilla drove up and got out of her car. She and Hamish ran to Elspeth. "Help me up," said Elspeth. "Let's get you to the hospital fast," said Hamish. "It's all right," said Elspeth. "She didn't get me. I'm wearing one of the Colonel's old flak jackets." Hamish rounded on Mr. Johnson. "Why was Elspeth left alone with this woman?" "I told them to," said Elspeth. "I thought I would be safe." Perry came running out. "What's happened?" "Oh, Perry," said Elspeth, and burst into tears. He wrapped his arms around her. "Hamish, the phones are back on," said Mr. Johnson. "Right, help me get her into the office, and I'll get Jimmy over from Strathbane." In the office, with ex-policeman Clary taking notes, Hamish switched on the small tape recorder he always carried with him and charged Tilly with attempted culpable homicide. She had subsided into a mutinous silence. Hamish tried question after question, but she just stared at him defiantly. At last, Hamish picked up the phone and, consulting his notebook, dialed Colin Fremont's number. "Colin, I have arrested your wife," he said. "Come up to the hotel." "No," said Tilly. "You have no right to bring him here." "I have every right." "Filth. You're all filth," said Tilly. "What? Men?" "Aye, the lot of you, and you will roast in hell for your bestial lusts." "Confession is good for the soul," said Hamish. "Why don't we begin at the beginning? Let's start with Katrina Beldam." "He went to her, my Colin. He'd never even disobeyed me before. He had to be stopped. Oh, she looked that startled when herself saw me, lying naked in her sinful bed. But I shut her up for good." "You could have been caught lighting that fuse," said Hamish. "Not me. The Lord was with me that day." "But Ina? Why Ina?" A tear ran down one of her cheeks, and she brushed it angrily away. "She was my best friend. We were always agreed on everything. Keep the men in their place, and if they won't stay there, give them a good whack. I thought she'd be pleased, but she said it was on her conscience, and she felt she ought to tell the police. The Lord was watching over me again, and he sent down a fog to cover me when I darted into Patel's and killed her." "And Ellie Macpherson?" "I couldn't take a chance. She had to be silenced. The Lord told me she had to be silenced." "And Fiona McNulty?" "That whore. I made Colin tell me about her. He said Fergus had been seeing her. My Ina's husband betraying her by going to a whore." Jimmy Anderson came in, flanked by Harry McNabb and a policewoman. "I have her confessions on tape," said Hamish wearily. "You'll find Clary has excellent shorthand notes as well. Take it away and interview her yourself, Jimmy." Hamish found Colin Fremont in the hall. He turned his head away as Tilly was taken past him. "You as well," said Jimmy, taking Colin's arm. "Hamish, file a full report." Colin was led out, protesting that he knew nothing about it. Hamish went back to where Priscilla was looking blankly at the stairs. "Where's Elspeth?" "She and Perry have gone to file a story. Want a drink?" "Just the one. I never asked where Blair was." They went into the bar. Hamish was miserable because the murderer had turned out to be one of the villagers. Priscilla was miserable because Perry and Elspeth seemed to be close. They ordered whiskies and sat in silence for a while. Then Priscilla said, "You should have gone with them. You solved the case." "The old reason, Priscilla. Too much focus on me means a promotion, and promotion means moving to Strathbane." "I can hardly believe it," said Priscilla. "I worked with Tilly from time to time on visits up here when there was a crofters' fair or something like that." "She beat her husband." Hamish took a swallow of his whiskey. "Fergus's wife beat him too, and I'm supposed to know everything that goes on in the village. I wonder what other bit of misery is going on behind closed doors that I don't know about." "You seem pretty low. Get a fright?" "Yes, something like that." When Hamish got back to the police station, he typed out a report and sent it over to Strathbane. Then he took the dog and cat out for a walk through the snow on the waterfront. The loch was glassy black. The air was still and crisp and cold. Bright stars shone down overhead. A television set in one of the cottages was playing a comedy, and the sound of canned laughter made Hamish feel as if the old gods were laughing at him for being such a blind fool. What was it Archie had said? "We don't do sex in Lochdew." Poor buggers, thought Hamish. He had a bright picture of Priscilla staring desolately at the stairs when Elspeth and Perry had just gone up to write their story. "Poor me," he said out loud. Chapter 11. The weaker sex to piety more prone. Sir William Alexander, Earl of Stirling. Jimmy called the following morning. "She's gone completely round the twist, Hamish." "Are you sure she's not just pretending to be mad to get out of a trial?" "Blair, finished her off, in a way. He insisted on doing the questioning, while I sat there like a tumshy, till he decided he was the devil's messenger, and she quoted the Bible at him non-stop. If he hadn't got that confession out of her, he might have had a job proving her guilty. And would you get this? They dug up the garden and found a computer and a supply of chemicals. More than that, our Tilly studied chemistry for a year at Strathbane University before dropping out. Blair's trying to take the credit, but Daviot read your statement. I think he's going to promote you this time. Give you a policeman to help you. Oh, no. Relax. He's just putting you up to sergeant. He says this police station, as he remembers it, has 2 bedrooms. Just the one. Come on, Hamish. You look shifty. Show it to me. Oh, all right. Hamish led him into the living room. He pulled back a curtain next to the bookcase, revealing a door. He opened it. Jimmy looked in. What on earth? I just used it over the years to put away stuff that might come in handy, said Hamish. An old fridge, a broken electric kettle, a lawn-mower, and that's just the stuff that's blocking the entrance. You'll need to get a skip and clean the place out. I don't want a policeman living with me. Settle for it, laddie. It's either that or Strathbane. I gather they're going ahead with Katrina's funeral this afternoon. Yes. There was some fuss about her being buried in consecrated ground, but Rory McBride is having her cremated and taking the ashes away with him. There's a service in the kirk at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and then what's left of her body will be taken to the crematorium at Strathbane. Won't be many there, I suppose. The women will turn up. They'll say it is their Christian duty, but it's just an excuse to wear a hat and gossip. They fair frighten me now. I feel I don't really know what they're like. Better not to. You know, Hamish, the day I discovered I didn't understand women at all was a great relief. After that, I just learned to take them as they came. Unfortunate choice of words, Jimmy. Got any whiskey? The sun isn't even over the yardarm. This is still winter. The sun has barely the strength to crawl up the sky. Oh, all right. Just the one. How's Colin taking it? I think he'll be all right. I took him home late last night. Fergus came round and hugged him and said he'd stay the night. Maybe they'll be able to help each other get over this. Hamish went up to the church in the afternoon. The Curry sisters had put in an appearance along with Mrs. Wellington. Rory McBride was there. Other than that, the church was deserted. Mr. Wellington gave a short sermon, they sang several hymns, and then the undertaker's men, who had been smoking outside the church, came in and bore off the coffin with the remains of Katrina. Hamish gave a sigh of relief as the hearse drove off, followed by one single car, driven by Rory McBride. I hope never to see another person like Katrina as long as I live, he said. He's talking to himself again, came the voice of Nessie Curry. Daft, that's what he is. Hamish made his escape. Priscilla had decided to hold a small party for Elspeth and Perry, who were leaving the following morning. She wanted to somehow get a date with Perry, even if it meant going to Glasgow to see him. She phoned the forensic lab and invited Leslie in the hope that Leslie would keep Hamish occupied. Mr. Johnson was invited, and Angela and Dr. Brodie as well. She decided she'd better ask Matthew Campbell and his wife, and maybe Mr. and Mrs. Wellington, and the long-staying guest, Dominic Gary. Then she realized she hadn't told Hamish about the party. She phoned him up, and he said he would be there. Priscilla was glad that her parents were away visiting friends in Caithness. Her father was quite capable of asking Perry to marry her. Hamish was getting ready for the party when he heard someone knocking at the kitchen door. He had just finished shaving. He wrapped a towel around his neck and went to answer the door. Leslie stood there, beaming. "I thought I would drive you up to the party," she said. "That way you can drink as much as you like." "I never was much of a drinker," said Hamish, "and I'd like to take my own vehicle. I never know when I'll be called out." "Aren't you going to ask me in?" "Just for a minute." Leslie swept past him in a cloud of perfume. She shrugged off her coat. She was wearing a transparent, spangly white chiffon blouse. Hamish could clearly see that underneath it she was wearing a very sturdy white brassiere. A short scarlet skirt, sheer stockings, and high heels completed the ensemble. "I'm sorry I shut the door on you," said Leslie. "You see, when you turned up in your uniform and with your pets, I assumed you just didn't care." "Why should I care that much?" asked Hamish. "It's not as if we're an item." "But we could be. You are to be promoted to sergeant, but with my help you could go a lot further." "Leslie, I really need to finish dressing. I do not want to be helped to fame and glory. I will see you at the party." Leslie could not quite believe this was happening. She had built up such a romantic scene in her mind. As the only woman in the lab, she had turned down date after date until she had begun to think of herself as irresistible. She had taken Hamish's advice and warned them all that she would report anyone for sexual harassment who overstepped the mark. The rude jokes and nasty things in her locker had promptly ceased, to be replaced with romantic tributes like chocolates and flowers. She did not know that her colleagues had opened a betting book to see who could seduce her first. Hamish turned away. "Shut the door on your road out." Priscilla and Elspeth had both spent a long time working on their appearances. As it was not a dressy affair, and taking place early in the evening, Priscilla had settled for a classic look, soft blue cashmere sweater with a matching skirt, and a sapphire and pearl choker necklace. Elspeth, who had a limited wardrobe, had decided on the Edith Piaf look to match her frizzy hair. She had put on a short black dress and plenty of white foundation cream, white powder, and scarlet lipstick. They entered the lounge at the same time, covertly eyeing each other. Elspeth immediately felt like a freak. She got a glimpse of herself in a mirror and thought miserably that she looked ill rather than attractive. She fled back upstairs and scrubbed off the white makeup and replaced it with something more subdued. By the time she went back down, most of the guests had arrived, with the exception of Perry. Angela Brodie went up to Hamish. "You really do scrub up well," she said. Hamish was wearing a beautifully tailored, charcoal grey suit with a silk tie. He had found the suit in a thrift shop and was amazed to find when he got it home that it fitted him perfectly. "You're looking charming yourself," said Hamish gallantly, although Angela was wearing a droopy dress as grey as her wispy hair. Perry entered and stood in the doorway of the lounge, smiling all around. Priscilla and Elspeth went straight up to him and began to talk. Hamish scowled. "What's up?" teased Angela. "You don't want them, but don't want anyone else to have them." Hamish scowled harder and moved away from her. He waited for an opportunity. Mrs. Wellington went up to them and then drew Priscilla away. Matthew Campbell approached them and began to talk. Hamish went over to Perry. "You haven't got a drink. Come with me to the bar." "I barely recognized you," said Perry. "You ought to dress up more often." He said to the barman, "I'll have a whiskey." Perry was feeling warm and tipsy. Priscilla had sent a bottle of chilled champagne to his room earlier, with the compliments of the hotel, and somehow he had drunk the lot. "Don't you ever get bored up here, Hamish?" he asked. "Och, no. There is always something funny going on." Hamish began to tell Perry some highly amusing and completely fictitious Highland stories. From time to time, either Elspeth or Priscilla tried to butt in, but Perry blocked them out as Hamish's soft Highland voice went on and on. The party began to thin out. Leslie cast one anguished look at Hamish and then left. Hamish saw her leave out of the corner of one eye, gave her 10 minutes, and then said, "Grand talking to you. Got to go." "But—" began Perry. Hamish was already rapidly making his way out of the lounge. Priscilla was caught up, saying goodbye to various guests. Then she found Elspeth beside her. "Perry has left," she whispered. "Where has he gone?" "Mr. Johnson said he went upstairs and put on his coat and went out. He said he shouldn't be driving after the amount he's drunk. He said he seemed tipsy." "Hamish," said Priscilla. "Hamish has charmed the boots off him. I bet he's gone down to the station." "Let's go down there," said Elspeth, she and Priscilla being joined in sisterly fury at Hamish. "We could listen outside and see if Perry talks about us." Hamish had just taken off his tie and jacket when he heard a knock at the kitchen door. "If that's you, Leslie," he shouted, "I've gone to bed." "No, it's me, Perry." Hamish opened the door. "Come in, I'll get the coffee on. You should never have driven after all you've had to drink. What's up?" "You just left. I thought maybe we could continue our conversation." "I'm afraid not. I'm right tired and want to go to bed." "Good idea," said Perry softly. I must be mistaken, thought Hamish, plugging in the percolator. Take your coat off. Coffee won't be long. Perry had driven so slowly and carefully that Elspeth and Priscilla had not been long behind him. They were now crouched in the snow outside the kitchen window. "Do you know, you've got the most marvellously long eyelashes," said Perry. Hamish sighed. "I think a mistake is being made here, laddie. Just to make things plain, I am heterosexual." "But you were chatting me up," cried Perry. "I told you a lot of stories, but not once did I say anything at all that would lead you to think that I fancied you. Now did I?" "I thought—" "You've had a lot to drink. Forget the coffee. I'm taking you back to the hotel, right now. You can get someone to come down in the morning to collect your car." Outside, shivering in the snow, Elspeth and Priscilla stared at each other. "I'm cold," said Elspeth. "Let's go inside and have some of that coffee." They crunched through the frozen snow. Hamish had left the door unlocked. They both went in and sat at the kitchen table and stared gloomily at each other. "I'm slipping," said Elspeth. "I never for a moment suspected a thing." "Nor me," said Priscilla. "Hamish must have been trying to protect us." Elspeth snorted. "Not that one. He deliberately took up all Perry's attention out of sheer jealousy. I'll get the coffee." "If he did that, I would like revenge," said Priscilla. "What about sending Leslie some flowers and saying they're from him?" "No, she'd just get hurt, and from the way she kept looking over at Hamish, he'd hurt her already. I don't see his pets." "He's probably taken his wives with him," said Priscilla. "His damn animals come first." Hamish, driving back to the police station, spotted Elspeth's car parked a little way along the waterfront. He stopped his own vehicle and went quietly towards the police station. He heard their voices from the kitchen. He walked back to his Land Rover and drove back to the hotel. Mr. Johnson reluctantly said he could have a room for the night, but the dog and cat would have to stay in the kitchen. Hamish waited an hour and then crept downstairs. The night porter was, as usual, asleep with his feet up on the desk. He went into the kitchen and summoned Sonsie and Luggs, who followed him quietly upstairs to his room. He hoped he would not run into Perry. By the time Priscilla found out in the morning that Hamish had stayed the night at the hotel, he had already left. Elspeth and Perry departed the next day, and a few hours later Priscilla left as well. No one wanted to say goodbye to Hamish Macbeth. More snow roared down from the north in the afternoon. Hamish found the sudden lack of activity made him feel restless. Usually he welcomed a chance to return to his old ways of sloping around the village or taking long drives over his extensive beat. He tried to phone Priscilla, but was told that she had left. Then there was another power cut, and the phones also went dead. Hamish would often say that he never watched very much television, but he found that with the snow preventing him from going anywhere, he missed it badly. He spent the day performing his usual chores as best he could, and tidying up the old files in the filing cabinet, and promising himself that as soon as the power came back on, he would transfer them onto his computer. At last, unable to bear the inactivity any longer, he put on his snowshoes, and, bending before the torrent of horizontal snow, fought his way along to see Angela Brodie. As he approached, he heard the thud of a generator, and saw that the lights were on in the doctor's cottage. Angela welcomed him and asked to hear all about how he had solved the murders, saying that she had not had an opportunity to ask him at the party because Hamish had spent all his time with Perry. Hamish winced inside. If it had not been for his regrettable streak of Highland malice, he would at least have had the pleasure of looking forward to seeing Priscilla again. Hamish accepted a glass of whisky, checking it carefully for cat hairs before he drank any. As he talked about the murders, he reflected how strange and distant it all seemed already. When he had finished, Angela said, "I hope that good-looking journalist Perry is not out to make trouble." "Why?" "He came to see me yesterday. I gather he was interested in doing a piece on the lack of sex in Loch Dhu." "I hope not. That would distress a lot of people." "Last week Mrs. Halberton Smythe met me at Patel's. She seemed to have high hopes of Priscilla marrying Perry." "Perry's gay." "Is he now? Pity. These good-looking men who take care of their appearance often are. Oh, 2 men were seen up on the mountains yesterday." "I hope they're all right," said Hamish. "The Highlands are plagued with amateur climbers. They have road signs for deer crossing, schools, elderly people crossing, and all that. They should have a warning sign showing a falling climber. In Glencoe in the winter it fair rains falling climbers. I wish the snow would ease up. I haven't been to see old Angus for a while. I got the weather report on my computer. Rain is supposed to be coming in from the west tonight. That'll mean flooding in other parts. We've been pretty lucky in Loch Dhu. Not thinking about getting married?" "Who to?" demanded Hamish. "Elspeth was mooning over that Perry, and so was Priscilla." "What about that girl Leslie?" "Oh, her. She wanted to make me over." "Never mind, Hamish. You should travel more. Maybe meet a nice girl." "Angela, I went to Spain, mind, and I was stuck in an hotel with a bundle of geriatrics. I've never been so popular with the opposite sex in my life." "You can't write off foreign travel just because of one unlucky holiday." "I'll see. Thanks for the whiskey." When Hamish left, the snow was still falling, but it had a dampish, sleety feel. He made supper for himself and his pets, cooking on top of the stove by gaslight, and then, carrying a lamp into the bedroom, undressed and got into bed. He read a detective story until his eyes began to droop, so he turned out the gas lamp and went to sleep. He was awakened in the morning by a loud thump as melting snow fell off the roof. Hamish got dressed and went outside. The wind had shifted around to the west and was blowing mild air in from the Gulf Stream. Everything glittered in the morning sun, and the air was full of the sound of running water. He got a shovel out of the shed and began to clear a path from the kitchen door. By midday, the electricity had come on again, and the phone was operating. In the afternoon, he called in at Patel's, bought a bag of groceries, and headed up the hill to Angus MacDonald's cottage. "I knew you would call today," said Angus, graciously accepting the provisions. "Saw it in your crystal ball, did you?" asked Hamish. "Sit down. I'll just be putting this stuff away. Any chance of a coffee?" "Aye." Hamish sat by the smouldering peat fire. Angus had not bothered to go through his usual performance of hanging the blackened kettle over the fire to boil. That was all part of his act as an olden times seer, and he couldn't be bothered wasting it on Hamish. Angus came back from the kitchen and handed Hamish a mug of coffee. Hamish took a sip and made a face. "This is dreadful stuff, Angus." "Is it now? It was yourself who gave me a jar of that last year." "I remember," said Hamish. "It was one of Patel's special offers." "I came to see how you were doing, Angus, but you seem to be fine." "I'm all right, but it is yourself you ought to be worrying about." "Why?" "There were these two men seen up on the mountain yesterday." "Angela told me about them, climbers." "I closed my eyes," crooned Angus, "and I saw evil." Hamish knew that Angus had a very powerful telescope. "What did you see?" he demanded. "I saw they were carrying rifles. No climbing equipment." Hamish thought of the two escaped poachers. "Well, they wouldn't hang around up there in the blizzard," he said. "Or, with any luck, they've frozen to death." "Have a look in the bothy, up the brae," said Angus. Hamish returned to the police station and collected a powerful torch, told his pets to stay where they were, and set off up the brae at the back, and then to the lower slopes of the Two Sisters, the twin mountains that dominated Loch Dhu. The bothy, a shepherd's hut, was at the top of a slope. Hamish struggled up through the soft, melting snow, feeling his feet and trousers beginning to get wet. He opened the door of the bothy and went in. There was a pan on the battered old stove in the corner with a few baked beans at the bottom. He shone the torch on the earthen floor, puddled with melting snow seeping into the ramshackle hut. There was a boot print in one corner, and in another a few empty cans. His heart sank. He was sure, somehow, it was the poachers. Climbers usually tidied up after themselves. He went outside and phoned Jimmy. "I think those poachers are back," said Hamish. "They've been spotted up at the back of Loch Dhu. It's dark now, but I think if you send a squad over, we could get started first light." "Wait a minute. I'll see what I can do." Hamish waited and waited. At last, Jimmy came back on the line. "Can't do anything, Hamish. There's a big drug bust tomorrow, and Blair says he needs all the men he can get." "But these men are armed." "All I can suggest is that you keep close to your station and don't try to go after them yourself. Look, as soon as this drug business is over, I'll come myself with as many men as I can get." The next day, Hamish was determined not to let fear of the poachers trap him in his police station. Just in case they came calling at the station, he left the dog and cat with Angela, explaining that he did not want to return home and find them shot. He debated whether to round up some of the local men to help him in the search, but decided against it. If one of them got shot in the hunt, he would never forgive himself. He had phoned Jimmy again, who had said Blair still refused to send any men. With his deer rifle beside him, he set out, driving up and over the hills, stopping occasionally at croft houses to ask if anyone had seen the two men. The weather was mild with the first hint of spring, and the snow was melting rapidly. Burns were in full spate, tumbling down the hillsides, their peaty gold water flashing in the sun. He searched bothies and outhouses for any sign of where they might have spent the night. The bothy he was sure they had been staying in was deserted. He was glad when night fell, feeling always that the scope of a rifle held by someone up on the hills was trained on him. Hamish phoned Jimmy and asked him to send over photographs of the two men. When they arrived, he printed copies of them and went out and stuck them up on the lamp-posts along the waterfront. That evening he carried an armchair from his living room and set it against the kitchen door. Then he slept in it, fully dressed, with his rifle at his side. He awoke briefly during the night, feeling pins and needles in his legs. By morning, he felt dirty and gritty, and he was in a foul mood. It was more than likely that the poachers were not after him, but simply hiding out from the police. Nonetheless, he went out searching again without success. The sun was warm. It was as if the blizzards had never happened, and all the misery that Katrina had brought to the village was rapidly disappearing in the clear light. When he went back to the village and was making his way to Angela's house to pick up his animals again, he saw a rare sight. Archie McLean and his wife were walking hand in hand along the waterfront. Other couples were strolling along, either holding hands as well, or with their arms around each other's waists. "What's happening?" Hamish asked Angela when she answered the door to him. "Has romance come to Lochadoo, or is there another witch around selling love potions?" "It's pretty awful. Haven't you seen the newspaper? It's that cursed Perry." Hamish followed her into the kitchen. She handed him a newspaper, folded over at a feature, and said, "Read that." The headline was enough for Hamish. "We don't do sex in Lochadoo." Underneath was a smaller headline, "Was it frustrated sex that caused the Lochadoo murders?" Hamish ran his eyes over the piece. It mentioned the fact that even the village constable was celibate. The Curry sisters were quoted as saying, "We don't go in for any nastiness like that round here." Hamish checked the other quotes, and his eyes narrowed. "There's a lot wrong here, Angela. I have a feeling that he asked the Curry sisters, for example, if they went in for S&M in the village. He put down replies, but omitted the questions." Hamish phoned Elspeth. When she came on the line, he said, "Thon was a malicious piece of writing from Perry." "Maybe it was because he was disappointed in love," said Elspeth. "Fancied you, didn't he?" "Cut that out. Do you know if he taped those interviews?" "He taped everything. He doesn't know any shorthand." "Can you get me the tape?" "He'd know it was me if I took it." "Do you think he ever leaves it in his car?" "I think he keeps it in the glove compartment when he's not working." "So break into his car and pinch it. Pinch the car if necessary." "Why should I?" Hamish took a deep breath. "This is a rotten, malicious piece of reporting, and you know it. Do you want someone like that on the staff?" There was a long silence, and then Elspeth said reluctantly, "I'll see what I can do." Elspeth flicked through a notebook she kept in her desk with the names of various villains. Sonny Turner had recently finished doing time for stealing cars. She made a note of his address, and after work made her way to a house in Clydebank. Sonny recognized her as a reporter he had seen on the press benches in the High Court and tried to close the door. Elspeth put her foot in the door and held up a £50 note. "I'm writing an article on car theft. I know you're clean, but I want a bit of advice." He nipped the note from her fingers and then opened the door wide. "Come in, Petal," he said. "You've come to the right man." Elspeth knew that Perry lived in a cul-de-sac off Great Western Road. She drove there at 4 in the morning, Perry's BMW was parked on the road outside. She crouched down by the car and assembled her kit, a wooden door wedge, a metal wire coat hanger, and a hammer. Following Sonny's instructions, she broke into the car. The alarm shrilled. With a beating heart, she dived into the car and, as per instructions, locked the door, unlocked it, opened the door from the inside, and hit the kill switch on the underside of the dashboard. The alarm fell silent. She peered up at the windows. Not a single light showed. People were used to faulty car alarms. She opened the glove compartment and seized Perry's small tape recorder. Then, to make it look like a real burglary, she took his radio and CD player as well. She let herself out of the car, stuffed the stolen goods and her equipment back into a travel bag, and scurried off to where she had parked her own car. Back in her own apartment, she switched on the tape recorder and ran it back to the Loch-Dhu interviews. It was as Hamish had expected. The Curry sisters were asked whether the women of the village liked to dress up as fantasy figures, nurses or little girls to excite their husbands. Mrs. Wellington had been asked if she ever wore leather in bed or had used a vibrator. "The sexual practices you are talking about are filth," Mrs. Wellington had said. But her reply, as published in the article, had appeared as, "All sex is filth." The other interviews were on the same tricky lines. Various villagers had been asked about Hamish's love life, and the replies had been mostly the same, that he did not have a girlfriend at the moment. Nothing about him being celibate. Elspeth felt the fury rise in her. Poor, innocent Loch-Dhu held up to ridicule. Wearing the thin gloves she had donned for the burglary, she typed out a note to the news desk at Scottish Television and packed up the tape recorder and the original article. She addressed the package and then drove to Scottish Television wearing an old motorcycle helmet and leathers from the days when she had used a motorbike. She studied herself in the mirror. Nobody could tell in her disguise whether she was a man or a woman. Elspeth was sent to cover the High Court the next day. A case of drug-pushing dragged on and then was finally adjourned to the following day. By the time she got back to the office, it was buzzing with the news of Perry's sacking. Scottish Television had played the tape on the lunchtime news. A troubleshooter had been sent to Loch-Dhu to pacify the maligned villagers with money. Perry had tried to blame Elspeth and was told roundly to forget it. He had made enough trouble already. Elspeth heaved a sigh of relief. She still had the stolen radio and CD player in her flat. The newspaper published a full apology. The villagers were compensated. Hamish found himself the pleased beneficiary of £1,000. As soon as it had arisen, the public demonstration of affection disappeared, and Loch-Dhu settled into its old ways. Chapter 12. To travel hopefully is a better thing than to arrive. Robert Louis Stevenson. Loch-Dhu settled down into its usual placid ways. Hamish hoped the poachers were long gone. He opened the door one misty morning to find his mother standing on the step. He stooped down and gave her a hug. "What brings you?" "I've a rare treat for you, Hamish," said Mrs. Macbeth, sitting at the table and opening up a capacious leather handbag. "Have you heard of Pedro's olive oil?" Hamish shook his red head. "And what did you win this time?" he asked. His mother was addicted to entering competitions. "This?" She pulled out a folder. "It's a 4-day trip to Barcelona, first class on Eurostar to Paris, then grand class on a train called the Juan Miró, and a few nights in a hotel. You'd need to leave in 2 weeks' time." "Can't you give it to anyone else, Mum? I mean, I've been to Spain." "It's a great big country. You've got to get out a bit." "How did you win?" "I wrote a slogan. Pedro's health-giving olive oil can give you long life. See? Simple. Better to keep it simple. They've got a photo of a fellow who looks like a Spanish Father Christmas to put on the bottles." "And that's it? What if someone uses the stuff aged 30 and drops dead?" "I don't have to bother about that. Anyway, it's all in the words. I said can, not will." A note of steel entered her voice. "What you need is a holiday. I'm leaving this folder here, and in a fortnight's time I want to hear you're on your way." In vain did Hamish protest. His mother slapped the folder down on the table and left. 2 days later, feeling he had done his duty by driving the many miles over his beat, he decided to take himself up into the hills. A little part of him was still worried that the poachers were out to get him. It was a grand day as he headed up into the mountains. The peaks of the Two Sisters were still covered in snow. The days were getting longer already, which was cheering. There was so very little daylight in the north in winter. A curlew piped its mournful note, and up above a golden eagle flashed its wings in the sun. He turned and looked back at the village. He could see a figure that looked like Archie MacLean painting something on a board outside his cottage. He took out a small pair of powerful binoculars and focused on the notice. It said, "Trips round the bay in a genuine Scottish fishing boat." Hamish remembered that Archie had decided to try his hand in a bit of tourism when the summer came along. The fish stocks were dwindling, and he had been searching around for a way to make some extra money. Right down the hill, something glinted in the heather. Hamish took to his heels and ran. He looked briefly back over his shoulder. 2 men with guns had risen out of the heather where they had been hiding. Hamish was a champion hill runner. He ran like the wind, heading up and up to a particular plateau he knew. The round tarns, those ponds like miniature Scottish lochs left behind by the Ice Age, shone like so many giants' blue eyes in the sun. On ran Hamish until he gained the plateau, which was covered by a peat bog. Experienced in the treacheries of the bog, he leapt from tussock to tussock, gained the far side, and crouched down behind a large boulder. He was unarmed. He took out his mobile phone and found that the battery was dead. His wits against 2 rifles. He could only hope it would work. What were their names again? He had it. The older one was Walter Wills, and the younger, Granger Home. He cautiously looked round the rock in time to see the 2 men on the far side of the bog. "There's the bastard!" shouted Wally. He raised his rifle. Hamish withdrew his head as a bullet pinged off the rock. Sound carried in the clear air. He heard Wally saying, "He can't be armed, or he'd have shot back. Come on, let's get him." Down below at his cottage window, Angus the seer put down his powerful telescope and hurtled out of his cottage and down the brae to the village, crying for help. Come on, muttered Hamish. Suddenly there was a cry. "Get me out of here!" Hamish peered round the rock. Granger had fallen into a peat bog. Wally put his gun down on the heather and tried to pull him out. "I'm sinking," moaned Granger. "You've got to hold me." "Here," said Wally. "Hold on to the butt of my rifle and I'll pull you out." There was a loud shot, and Wally fell to the ground. He forgot to put the safety catch on, thought Hamish. The man shot himself. Hamish hurried towards them. Someone had left a long branch, which they had been using as a walking stick. He seized it and then crouched down by Granger. "I'm going to wedge this under your arms. Don't move or struggle. I'll get help." He then went to Wally. The man's blank eyes looked up to the indifferent sky. "I shot him." Tears ran down Granger's cheeks. "When I grabbed his rifle, I must have pulled the trigger." "It won't be long," said Hamish. He ran off. Further down the slopes he met a posse of gillies and gamekeepers and told them what had happened. "Air Sea Rescue will be along in a minute. They can pull him out of the bog," said one gilly. By the time they returned, a helicopter had come over the mountains and was hovering over the bog. 2 men came down. "The best thing you can do," said Hamish, "is get a rope round him and pull him out." As they fastened the rope under Granger's armpits, Hamish charged him with attempted murder. The rope was then tied securely onto the cable, and the helicopter was signalled to haul away. The rope strained, and then, with a great plop, like a cork being pulled out of a bottle, Granger was up and out of the bog. "Get a stretcher down and lash him onto it," ordered Hamish. "There's no need for that at all," said an ambulance man. "The winch is here. They can haul both of us up." "I'm ordering you to get this man on a stretcher. I fear he may attack you." "I'm a paramedic, and he looks as quiet as a lamb to me. Come on, son, let's get you winched up." Hamish watched as the 2 figures rose up to the helicopter. Then the paramedic screamed, and Granger fell, spiraling straight down. He smashed into the rock Hamish had been hiding behind and lay still. Sirens were sounding in the village below. Another paramedic was winched down. His face was white with shock. "He knifed Johnny." "Is Johnny going to be all right?" asked Hamish. Aye, he just slashed at his hand. Is this fellow dead? Yes, very. I think he blamed himself for the death of his friend. I was worried something like this might happen. It was to be a long day. The bodies of Walter and Granger were winched up to be taken to the Procurator Fiscal in Strathbane. Hamish told the gillies and keepers to make sure none of the approaching police went into the bog. Jimmy Anderson eventually arrived, gasping and panting, surrounded by armed police. "You're too late," said Hamish. "Two dead men. Where's Blair?" "Down in his car. You won't see him climbing up anywhere." Hamish described what had happened. "Lots of paperwork for you," said Jimmy, when Hamish had finished. "You weren't armed?" "No." "That's a mercy. I wouldn't put it past Blair to try to claim you shot Wally." "Do you want me to help you down the hill?" "Hamish, I've got to stay here for the forensic team. You'd better go down and report to Blair. Have you heard the news about Leslie?" "No. What?" "She's engaged to be married to her boss, Bruce. She did ask me to be sure to let you know." "I'm not going down to report to Blair," said Hamish. "Tell him I'm looking for clues or something." "I came to borrow a cup of sugar," she said. Hamish smiled down at her. "You've come to the right place. Come on in." Detective Chief Inspector Blair sulkily followed his wife, Mary, into the delicatessen. Mary had said olive oil was healthier for cooking. Blair suddenly felt he was being haunted. The artist in Barcelona had decided to put Hamish's picture on all the new bottles. From row after row of bottles, Hamish's face grinned down. Blair turned about and went into the nearest pub. He had stopped drinking for 5 days, and he was getting hallucinations. Must be the lack of alcohol. He ordered a double whiskey, and then hid in a dark corner of the pub, hoping his wife would not find him.